We're going to be talking about all of the drama surrounding co-streaming, which of course was kicked off by ESL implementing brand new co-streaming rules. And now you may be thinking, Monty, surely this has been done to death. What more interesting topics could there be? Well, I threatened on Twitter to actually make a video about this, and this is that video, because I think what hasn't been said is a lot of the history of co-streaming that co-streamers themselves don't even know, by the way. A lot of the co-streamers, in fact, all of them, are too young to actually understand the history of esports broadcasts and the arguments that I'm going to be making on this episode, such as it was actually co-streaming at first that we think of as esports casting. And then once franchising took hold and we saw more and more money entering the esports space, that's when we got the more traditional casts and moved away from co-streaming. And now we're back to co-streaming again. And I'm going to provide plenty of historical examples that people will most likely have forgotten or never known about today to show that the natural mode of casting has basically been co-streaming in an environment that wasn't manipulated by a bunch of random sports producers and outside money. When it was left to its own devices in the early days, it was basically.
By the way, I would even argue, Monty, that in some ways is what cuts the Gordian knot, isn't it? Because, you know, all the people, particularly in the case, it's not as much in CS because, like, obviously the main broadcaster with more than only pixels, but obviously famously in LEC. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, bro, someone had a screenshot of the main stream having 8K viewers. Like, if Caedrel turns his stream on, like, he can have the majority of the viewers of that stream. I think what people miss is also this detail, so I'll tease this now, which is, if you ever listen to people complain, bro, no matter how obnoxious they are, if you can sort of read between the lines, you will actually usually find something of value, like at a minimum, what matters to them. When people already complain about normal casters, think about what we're talking about. The most boring, here's a normal professional sports broadcast where we feign being neutral and we try to talk about everyone in a fair way, all that nonsense that I don't even believe in, right? Fans never buy that anyway, Monty. They always say if Law, who is French, comments on MCoy losing a game who's Spanish, every Spanish fan's going to go, that French, you know what, is biased. She obviously hates the Spanish team because she is French and she was to support Carmine Corp, right? What they're actually telling you there, Monty, is I never wanted an objective neutral broadcast. I always just wanted people to wear their heart on their sleeve, admit who you like and who you don't, and just be biased as fuck. And the point, what they're really saying there, Monty, is I want to listen to the Spanish broadcast. That's what they're actually saying. And what they mean otherwise, if they're a KC fan, is get this Spanish shit off. I want to listen to the KC broadcast where we talk about vitality of KC. That's what I think low key. That's actually the secret no one's getting into, which is, it's not like, by the way, Caedrel himself used to be on LEC. He didn't do this style of casting, did he? He did the more boring Riot style. So anyway, we'll get to that later. That's definitely a topic on the rise.
Well, also, I think it's interesting to talk about how Counter-Strike has been much more immune to the co-caster phenomenon. And I think a lot of that is because that it has a more OG style of casting within it, because it didn't get taken over by franchises. And there is actual competition between tournament operators for talent, which is important.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's true.
And you know, the way that the casters present themselves is less, I would say, sportsified than other games. And sure, there are big co-streamers within Counter-Strike, but many of them are non-English, as in they have the official broadcast rights to non-English streams, right? They are given that license. And then even the English ones are smaller in comparison to like a Caedrel who takes over the entire scene, right? And is 70% probably of League of Legends esports.
By the way, on
viewership.
The same exact angle, though, that's another reason to tease everyone as to why I think Counter-Strike works as better as a game in terms of the official broadcast, is because you will know this. What's the number one thing everyone from the other game says about Counter-Strike? Like, hey, it's the one where you can have fun and be edgy and say what they miss
they got
is
the best
this.
casters.
They always say it though, like, oh, it's like a throwback. No, that is what esports is, you idiots. Like, the real problem here is everyone else. That's why I always tell people, Monty, esports is not even trying to be sports. It's trying to be sports from 1980, bro. It's trying to be like literally. Remember that one I've always told you I thought was the most embarrassing commentary clip ever, where Joe Buck got really angry at fucking Randy Moss for fake mooning the fucking Dallas Cowboys crowd. He didn't even really do it, Monty, but he just pretended to pull his. And remember, Joe Buck goes, "This is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen." Because remember, that was the NFL on Sunday, bro. That was supposed to be like, you know, your kids around.
That's
you come home from
God's
church.
Day,
yeah. So my problem is, the joke is, esports, especially games like League, bro, bro. They want their broadcast to be like that, though, to be like some ridiculous artifice. Whereas in Counter-Strike, isn't what people like. That it is more in the vein of, like, not our age, but like the 25-year-old who is a little bit more edgy, and he knows that when FaZe fucks around, you don't go, ooh, FaZe shenanigans. You go, FaZe bullshit. And when Apex comes up, you go, listen, the crowd's saying, fuck you, Apex. That's baller. That's just what we're essentially getting to here also, Monty, is the Counter-Strike broadcast is closer to Counter-Strike fan culture. The League of Legends broadcast is in some like alien, we live in Elysium fucking space station that never existed. And all the real fans are on the planet Earth and they're all like degenerate mutants. Like there's no connection between the two. It's actually crazy how badly aligned it is.
And on our last episode of this show, we also talked about Overwatch, and I talked about the disconnect between the fandom, the esports fandom, and what it became, right? Which was very shocking considering what DoA and I had signed our contracts for. But also, you guys are probably wondering why it's just me and Thorin. Well, you know what? We hadn't done this show in a month. Richard's been very busy at events, and we thought maybe we should just get an episode out. So here you go. Enjoy it. Stop complaining. Just pretend it's Summoning Insight and shut the fuck up. So
also, secondly, that means you don't have to worry that the apocalypse is in now because only 2 of the Horsemen are riding. So if there's only 2, it's still bad, but it's not as bad as when all 4 are there. You know, that must be the thing. I guess.
And the other reason is because, you know, for guests, there's only a few guests that I think will be able to...
Here's the thing. If it wasn't for the fact it probably hurt his feelings, you should have made an evil joke like, no, you don't have to complain about Richard interrupting all the time. Even though he doesn't. I always tell people, you know, this show isn't an interview. It's literally a free-for-all. You never seen how dogs eat, bro. There's a reason the rod doesn't get as much food because everyone's nuzzling him out the way and all aggressive. Yeah, that's what... you can confirm this, Monty. I actually try, where possible, to tell guests before the show starts.
Yes.
Mate, just get in there. Just say shit. We'll shut up if you talk. Because it's just how this show is, mate. We're not sitting waiting our turns like C-SPAN. Like, you have 2 minutes, sir, to give your... We're not doing that, are we?
And basically, I have to mildly referee sometimes.
Of course.
But in any case, I think what I want to talk about, like I said, I want to start with the history. And there are only a couple guests who could probably speak to this. But I, you know, frankly, I don't even know if they'd want to or be interested in it. But I think what's important to recognize as we talk about co-streaming is, like, I think we should just define what co-streaming is, which is a very kind of laid back, casual, personality first approach to the game that also typically includes people who understand analysis at a high level.
Sure.
Right. But what it is designed for, and this may surprise some people, is hardcore fans for the most part.
Yes.
And people might say, well, if it's for hardcore fans, why is it the dominant form of viewership? Because casual fans don't exist in esports anymore, right? And the reason why you see the big streamers, like, think about all of the biggest co-streamers in, say, League of Legends history. It's been people like Dom, Caedrel, LS. These are hardcore professional players or analysts.
Yes.
And so, sure, they're entertaining too.
But as a contrast, it's not like fucking D-Man did it and then he became the biggest ever.
Yeah, exactly.
The classic traditional caster. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we haven't seen a lot of play-by-play casters transition into this role. Primarily, it has been the most hardcore people who find a way to be more entertaining, right? And that's been the battle, is to convert. Really, it has been a journey for most of them from hardcore analysis into packaging that into entertainment. And the thing is that most esports original broadcasts were just extremely hardcore people catering to a hardcore fan base. And you may there's not really a way to disagree that League of Legends has contracted at this point to there are no casuals. It is really the most hardcore fans. This is why we have seen so much of the English language viewership transition to LCK now. When I casted LCK, it wasn't the biggest league. LCK is the largest English watched league in the world now. Now, part of that is they have more broadcast days, right? But it is smoking.
Don't you feel like that's actually a thing? Here's the thing, Monty. You're saying that. I agree with you, by the way. I was going to say something. It's what I basically implied about the Counter-Strike example. The real problem League of Legends has is it acts like we're still in 2013 every single year, and these are all brand new fans just coming to the game.
Yeah,
whereas actually, first of all, the game itself is also 1,000 times more complicated. There's like 160 champions or something. Like, there's so many things that are like...
It's also 17 years old.
Yeah, and also, I agree with you. The real mistake that Riot's made, and as far as I can tell, they haven't even acknowledged this, bro. It's why it's actually big that you bring it up, is they still act like they're courting the guy who's coming into the club for the first time. But there are no other guys coming in. We're all like repeat customers. And what you're actually doing now is we're going, hey, we need you to change it to fit us. And then you're going, no, I'm going to get more than you guys. Don't say, what you guys? You've got to get. Because I agree that essentially the viewer, most of them didn't mind the old broadcast because they were 15, but they outgrew it and now they're like 27 or something. It's true.
Yeah. And also, it was one thing, the dynamics of esports have changed because most esports are not courting new viewers anymore, right? That's not a thing. At this point in time in esports winter, basically all the esports that are big are old games.
Yeah, of course.
And I talked about this also.
Bro, even Valorant's like 6 years old now. Like, they're all old, yeah.
And I talked about this, by the way. We actually do secretly have a Last Free Nation gaming channel that we've kind of under the radar put out there. I actually have a video essay on there about the state of gaming, which was a report by a guy named Matthew Ball. And what's interesting about this is that basically nobody's even playing new games anymore of any variety. And something like 45% of playtime is on franchises that are more than 6 years old. So, you see these multiplayer franchises, or games or franchises, I should say. It includes like the new Call of Duty, obviously. But there's a huge amount of playtime that is going towards older games. And there's not really a lot of interest in new games comparatively. And so what you're getting is a hardcore demographic.
By the way, when the Quake Champions circuit died, Monty, they literally, this is not a joke, just like how in StarCraft 2 they all played Brood War, they all just went back and they play Quake Live now again.
Yeah.
From like 15 years ago, so mental. Yeah, exactly. Like everyone's a retro gamer now.
So I think it's actually important to start this story with StarCraft. Interestingly enough, to go back to that, because when we talk about StarCraft, it really is important to acknowledge the place that Tasteless and Artosis, which were basically the progenitors of co-streaming, what place they were at, because both of them effectively just came to Korea of their own accord, slept on people's couches, bummed around, had no money, and ended up at the start of GSL. And it started in Brood War, obviously, with Tasteless. And then in StarCraft 2, Artosis was, and later in Brood War, I guess, in StarCraft 2, Artosis started getting involved. And for those people who don't know what GSL was, it was a Korean tournament, and they did the English language broadcast. And it's very important to note that their casual style of play really casting really resonated with gamers. And crucially, they were on every GSL broadcast for years. Now, other people, DoA, including DoA and Wolf, the current LCK caster. Now, they came on later, along with Caldor and other people, right? And Valdez, who is also an LCK caster now. So they did have a variety of other people later on, but they were mostly doing Code A, which was like the under league. And so GSL was a pay-per-view league. You had to pay for VODs. And most people watched it on VOD because it was in the middle of the night in America because of time zones. So you wanted to pay, I paid $20 a month, I think starting in 2007 for this service. And what happened was that Tasteless and Artosis became very famous as a result of this. Much more famous relative to the stars in that league than you would think.
I mean, the joke used to be they were the real stars of StarCraft 2, weren't they, for a while?
Yes.
That's who in the watch. Yeah, for
in the same way that if we look at people in League of Legends right now, like Kameto or Ibai or Caedrel, they are more famous than 99% of the players.
Yes.
I think it's probably fair to say, right? Especially the ones in the West.
Like, I even put it this way, Monty. I always think actually the slightly exaggerated thing about Los Ratones is like, it's because of all the big names like Reckless and Nemesis. I always just said this, bro, when they split apart and they were playing separately, I said, I wish we could run an A/B test and have Caedrel pick up a bunch of unknown people, because I'm pretty sure that actually, despite the fact, yes, Reckless and them are huge names, I think the Caedrel team would beat you because, as you say, they're tuning in for Caedrel, and then after that, it's whatever his team is, I think. I think actually that was the like slightly distracting part, is that you did have all these LEC names,
And I can say this because I was doing, I was around esports at that time. I had been doing volunteer work, I had been working in the industry, but really at the time that the GSL was running, I wasn't doing much in esports in that era. Like I stopped in like 2005, 2006 in Warcraft 3, and then I got back into it in like 2009 with League of Legends. But for the most part, I was doing my own projects or I was out of the scene. I was still watching though. And I can tell you that there was and still is for me, a warm, fuzzy feeling of listening to Tasteless and Artosis cast because they were what I tuned in for. And what they did was they created an environment that, and I said this on Twitter, it was a rider to the Korean production. So it was basically co-streaming. And that's and we'll get into, that's what DoA and I did too at the start of Champions Korea when we were casting on OGN, is that the Korean production, sure, they did everything. But basically, as an English-speaking caster in Korea, what you were given was a feed on a monitor, and that's it. And it's like, you got to do the research yourself. They're going along with the Korean production, so you're just kind of surfing the wave that's going on. They're not talking in your ear. You're not able to talk back to them and say, hey, no, we got to move to the next segment or show this graphic. You just riding with whatever the Korean broadcast. It was co-streaming, guys. It was actually just co-streaming. You were just in the studio. That's the only difference. And guess what, Thorin? Where do people do co-streaming now? From the stadiums. It's the same shit. It's actually just the same exact thing that I did, that Tasteless and Artosis did. But the thing is that just like Caedrel, people want to tune into the same commentary every time. They develop an affection for that commentator. And they also, crucially, they know when they hear that commentator that the match is maybe important, right? Because why would they be there if it wasn't important? That's why Tasteless and Artosis were always on Code S together. That's why they had to be at every major StarCraft tournament, at the MLGs, right? And this process, we've actually already seen A/B tested. And this is the very key aspect that I want to discuss, because I was part of the StarCraft and League of Legends A/B test for what it was effectively co-streaming, right? Because again, DoA and I were on OGN, and it seems like, oh, you were a normal caster. No, it was very different than casting at League of Legends international events, because again, it was basically just a co-stream with me and DoA. And if the fans didn't like us and we got negative feedback, we would just be fired. Because the Koreans didn't give a fuck. They would just replace us with somebody else. But we had to do more work. Our asses were on the line. I did all my own research. I did all my own additional content, right? I did Summoning Insight. Nobody else was doing shows or podcasts. I was coaching teams. I made sure I was everywhere, right? And so then we get into a position where my first year at OGN, right? We're doing great in League of Legends, but Blizzard makes a very intriguing decision. And that decision is, here's the WCS. We're revamping the entire StarCraft circuit, right? And all of a sudden, the StarCraft 2, which used to be only the GSL, was carved into, okay, we're going to carve it into Star League, which was OGN's historic tournament. And some seasons going to be GSL, some seasons are going to be Star League. And we're going to do it in every season's going to be, one's going to be in OGN studio, one's going to be in GSL studio. But this is crucial, both English broadcasts are going to be running simultaneously. So if the event is taking place in the GSL studio, DoA and I had a clean feed from their studio, but there was no audience. And if it was taking place in the OGN studio, Tasteless and Artosis had a clean feed to the match, right? So that everybody would still be happy. But what this was, guys, was basically just an A/B test of co-streaming. And you know what? Nobody fucking watched me and DoA, because of course they didn't. Everybody watched Tasteless and Artosis, even when they were casting remotely. Exactly like co-streamers right now. They're not in the studios every day. They are at some of the finals, right? But people prefer Tasteless and Artosis because that's what they were used to. And you know what? They were better than me and DoA. Of course they were. Of course they were. And then not only that, you might say, oh, that was just a one-off, Monty. This same thing happened in League of Legends because Riot did the exact same shit. What they did was they gave half the broadcast to SPO TV and they gave half the broadcast to OGN. And they said, this is best for competition within the Korean scene. Now, ignore the fact that they eventually took over the whole broadcast. Why don't they just have OGN compete with them? I don't get it. I thought competition was best for the scene, but we ignored the lies that they tell, right? So what happened is, you may know, SPO TV hired LS and Valdez. So it's me and DoA on one stream and LS and Valdez. And then also it was later Papa Smithy and Achilleos, right?
And
So
this is
at
obviously
OGN.
before LS is like really blown up. So like,
Yes,
that's
this was
also one
way
reason
before.
he didn't succeed on this broadcast.
Yeah, this was way before.
Yeah.
So, but later on, LS became more well known, just as co-streamers do today, by over time and people getting used to them and them honing their skills and everything like that. Also, crucially, I would say after DoA and I left, because then we left the playing field open. Let's put it that way, right? But Riot said, okay, well, you guys are going to do the exact same thing, 2 competing simultaneous English broadcasts. But as you guys know, LCK takes place 5 days a week. So it was like 2 days a week, I think, at SPO TV and 3 days a week at OGN. So a lot of times we were just in a fucking closet. Guys, we were in a closet, just basically a tiny little room with a camera pointed at us and a clean feed. That was it. And you would have thought, oh, the desk and all the production value of being there would have trumped. We had 99% of the viewership, probably. And so it was very clear, I think, between both of these examples. And by the way, no producer has ever learned from this in esports. I don't even think most of them realized it existed, or they memory hold it out of existence after they did it. But effectively, you could already see that casting was extremely important. In fact, it was maybe the most important thing to the audience's affinity for the broadcast, because when given a choice in StarCraft, they picked Tasteless and Artosis. And when given a choice in League of Legends, they picked me and DoA and the rest of the OGN crew, right? And just like right now, when people are given a choice, most of them are picking Caedrel. And I think you have to ask, why is that the case? And is this the natural mode of esports? But there isn't fundamentally a difference between my experience casting for most of my career and what Caedrel is doing now. There's not. And like I think people just forget the history and they pretend that casting in the way that it's done now is really dominant. But if you're wondering about the reasons why Riot does things the way they do, well, a part of that was because DoA and I freaked them out because we had so much control. When Papa and DoA and I refused to go to MSI, and we did VOD reviews because co-streaming didn't exist, so we would just wait till the games were over and then replay the VODs. I was getting 10 or 15,000 concurrent viewers on my Twitch channel, and this was in 2015, and it was for VODs, right? And if you want to see the loyalty now, to put this in perspective for Tasteless and Artosis, okay, they run ASL, right, which is the current StarCraft Brood War tournament. There are many OG people watching this, okay? ASL, again, not even StarCraft 2 anymore, Brood War. They do not cover the matches live because Artosis moved to Canada. And so it's the middle of the night for him. So they record VODs of their commentary and release them on YouTube. The one from 5 days ago has 92,000 views on a VOD of an English language broadcast that was recorded after the fact, not even live. So their level of pull to this day in StarCraft, and we're talking nearly 20 years, actually over 20. Actually, Tasteless has been at this in Korea for over 20 years at this point in time, because there are all these OG fans and they do care about the co-streaming. So you can't look at me and say co-streaming is a new phenomenon, because the effects of co-stream are still right here. And I promise you, if some of the big co-streamers today in the twilight of League of Legends, they will still be able to pull the big numbers like this. If Brood War can pull the big numbers like this, and it was never as big of a game, in the West especially, as Counter-Strike or League of Legends, I mean, it's remarkable. And that's not a one-off, by the way, guys. I'm literally scrolling the page. 108K views 13 days ago, 125K two weeks ago, 91 3 weeks ago. Like, it's extraordinary. We at the Four Horsemen are proud to be brought to you by Prize Picks. And as you guys know, the NBA playoffs, as well as the hockey playoffs, are going on right now. And there's no better way to cash in on the high-flying hoops action than Prize Picks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Every bucket, every dime, and every win means more when you're playing on Prize Picks. So don't pass up your next shot with Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. And right now, they're having a 2026 NBA Finals sweepstakes sweepstakes. What does this mean? It means you pick live squares during the NBA playoffs, and you could win a trip for 2 to the NBA Finals. To enter, all you have to do is make a $5 lineup with at least one live NBA player pick during any part of the 2026 NBA playoffs. Live player picks are picks made after a game is already in progress. And for prize picks, not only do they have the NBA, but of course they have esports as well. They've got League of Legends, they've got Counter-Strike, and it's really easy to play. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. In esports, this could be kills in Counter-Strike or League of Legends. So a player will be listed. Let's say they're supposed to get 9 kills. You pick more or less than 9 kills, depending on how you think their performance will be. You pick 2 to 6 players with their live stat projections, and you can mix and match. You can even pick an NBA player and a League of Legends player if you want. And that means if you get your picks right, you could cash in. So goes across all kinds of sports: NBA, baseball, hockey, soccer, even college sports, tennis, golf, and esports, as we already discussed. It's also available now in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. So you can download the Prize Picks app today and use code HORSEMEN, that's plural, HORSEMEN, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HORSEMEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, a preferred partner of the NBA.
So I've got an angle for you. I've got 2 for you. So this is actually another example of how when people try to draw an allusion to sports, first of all, whenever anyone does that in esports, it's not that it's wrong. It's just most times they're not actually using specifics. They're using an abstract idea of what they think a sports broadcast is or what it meant to them in the past. So there's 2 things, which is actually, if you look at sports, I always tell people this, all the things that in esports, we're trying to get closer to sports, they're trying to get the fuck away from that and closer to the esports ethos. So there's one I always tell people, which is really bizarre, which is inadvertently, Joe Rogan invented co-streaming in the 2010s. What happened was, when he did the Joe Rogan Experience, he eventually had the idea to just do a series called Joe Rogan Fight Companion, where him and the boys, like a bunch of the comedians he knows, would just watch. Like, look, they didn't have the rights to it because obviously the UFC wouldn't give you the actual right to it, but they would just be a watch party. They essentially had a stream on them, and they just watched the fights live when Joe Rogan wasn't working that UFC night, because obviously eventually they became so many cards, he would only do the big ones or whatever, So him and Joy Diaz, all the people, all those comedians in his circle, They would just literally sit there, drink a bunch of brews, comment, and then because it wasn't an official broadcast on Monty, the reason this was mega, by the way, it just never went anywhere. He just did it on his channel. So the UFC never thought to make this like a second option or something. The reason it's crazy is, as you can imagine, he was very different to how he would be when he would be buttoned up on the broadcast. Like he was able to be a lot edgier. By the way, it's why having all the comedians was hilarious, because someone like Joy Diaz only loosely follows the UFC, so he'd be making all crazy analogies and outrageous blue jokes, etc. But it meant it had this like extra appeal. And imagine, by the way, think of like a UFC type crowd. Listen, on some level, I always think this is a key concept for this discussion. If it's the best match ever, like the championship fight in the UFC or the world championship final, low key, we all actually want the real broadcast. We want a really professional thing because it's about the game in that moment, isn't it? But one thing you're sort of getting to here, which is why I think something like the Fight Companion worked, is what about the like 60% of matches that aren't the biggest game, though, that actually can't always. I always say this. What do you think my entire style lived off as an analyst in Counter-Strike Pro? Remember, I was never a pro, and compared to a pleb, I'm supposed to be a guy who doesn't understand the game. Yes, but what I did is entertain the fuck out of everyone on all the games that weren't interesting. The difference is you only wanted to hear Sponge and Yanko go deep when it was like the 2 best teams or some tactical masterclass. When it was a shit-fest game, bro, that was a bad game, you don't want to hear analysis of that. It's not good. It's actually better if I riff on it and make a joke or make like, oh, by the way, this is literally what Tasteless and Artosis did. They'd have all that shit when they brought the nerd culture in and taking all the nerd points.
It's what DoA and I learned from them. That's why we talked about like Star Wars and
shit. Shall I tell you something mad? A lot of people don't know this. There's even like after effects of the era of doing summoning, insight, and casting that people don't even know themselves are connected. So, for example, people half mockingly call that player Morgan, who now says Team Liquid, Lord Morgan. None of them know where that comes from, bro. That was like some shit we literally invented for Flame in like 2014 or something, bro, just to like big up the fact that he was like the carry on a bad team. Like, it was ridiculous. So there's so many elements. Notice here's what's funny, Monty. You always thought it was like an albatross around your neck that the most famous moment you ever did was the train whistle. No, what that shows, Monty, is that's what people remember. No, but that's what people remember. I always say this to Yanko to be half BM and to half make a point to him, which is, Yanko, you might be the best analyst ever in the history of Counter-Strike. You probably made a million greater points than I did about strats. So no one can remember a single one of them, bro. Everyone remembers when I smashed a baguette, when I told Shaq he was fat. Everyone remembers that. I'm sorry, it's not my fault, bro. That is just how entertainment works. So anyway, the last thing is as well, I think another example where sports is trying to move in this direction, but even they get trapped in their own sort of like shadow of what they think sports is. Bro, you know this. It's the Manning cast. Mate, if I'm going to watch an average game, the real Manning cast at the beginning was mega because it was literally the comedy element of the brothers, but then also Peyton Manning's a nerd, so he was like nerding out on the game like an LS would, right? You know what ruined the Manning cast? Some dickhead sports producer told them, "See, have guests on all the time," and they'd be, mate, I'd be literally in the middle of a game, and they'd be going like, "It's the thing. It's one thing if they're Bill Belichick on board. They'd be having like comedian. They'd have like Kevin Hart on or something. They'd be like, "So Kevin, how's your latest movie?" I'm like, "I'm trying to watch the game. What are you doing?" Like, so even they don't get it, bro. That like the joke is, if I could actually pay for real, Monty, a subscription like a Tasteless and Artosis thing to only watch the Manning brothers with no guests, just I would do that rather than watch the NFL main broadcast. I kind of like the vibe of it. Also, another thing I like how tied to what we're saying here is, notice when you are the core streamer and you have one layer of separation of distance between you, you aren't the broadcast, you're watching the broadcast. It allows you, much like a mystery science data 3000, you're allowed to be a bit sillier, a bit more critical. You're allowed to sort of like jab at people in a way that would be considered unprofessional on the broadcast. As I said earlier, mate, if you put Caedrel back in the LEC studio, he doesn't do any of this shit. He never would have developed into this type of a guy, right?
Well, it's also true that I think DoA and I did it more because there's a cultural and language separation between us and the Korean players. You know what I mean? Like it's, you can't, I think there are ways to do it, but I agree that if he was in the LEC studio, he wouldn't be doing a lot of this stuff.
And if he'd have just stayed there forever, bro, he never would have developed this character, would he? He wasn't like that on the LEC. You know this, bro. Do you know the funniest thing about Caedrel? We just said it earlier, but people won't get this. Look, I won't take total credit for it. I just played a small part in it. But one of the things I've tried to do in my career, I always tell people, is either with players who are considered toxic but very talented, forgiven, Naniwa, the fucking simple, or with people who I think they're actually brilliant analysts and they have really deep insight, but they just don't have like the personality down. They haven't like filed the fucking rough edges off. So people like LS, Caedrel, and people don't know, LS was just considered an annoying arsehole. That was what he was in the era you're talking about. Like, he actually had a hard breakthrough. I remember everyone used to just hate on him. I remember every thread was people still bringing up that shit when he was 15 in Brood War, when he like cheated on a map or something. That was like every league thread. It's mad now because now he's one of the most ubiquitously loved massive figures in the game. Everyone's into his shit. Same with Caedrel, mate. Caedrel's was the worst. Caedrel was just considered a really boring guy who never made it as a pro in LEC. Like, no one was even, when Kelsey Morsey used to tell me we should get this guy on, like, I would bring him on and I'd be like, yeah, he's really good. But everyone else, all the people were like, this is boring. Because he would just be like, really playing. Like, here's what happened on the jungle path thing. And at 243, he could have got the crab. He didn't have this crazy persona he developed later. And the joke now is, if you ever watch his broadcast now, I think most fans are only there for the persona, mate. They want like the streaming about stuff and the over-the-top pantomime. They're not really there as much for the super deep analytics, because do they even get it? Who knows, right? I feel like isn't like an element of not being overly serious part of what the appeal of core streaming is?
Of course. But that was also the same appeal of the early days of esports, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
If you go back, literally, you can go watch clips of GSL, the official broadcast, and because it was a janky English co-stream, you can see montages of shit like Artosis answers questions from the GOM TV forum. So they did this interactivity segment. And the funny thing was, it was an old school forum, right? So people could put their name as whatever they want. And like, this is where we got legendary esports memes like Poop Feast 420, right? Which was somebody's username. And apparently it's really funny to watch these montages because he's like, oh, Poop Feast 420 again. What? He asked good questions. Or Artosis Mermaid, right? And then there were all the Grack memes around Greg Fields,
sure.
aka
Yes.
like Idra, right?
Yeah.
And so, it was personable because you could troll the actual broadcast in the same way that you can troll a co-streamer. That community interaction was there. It wasn't there in a Twitch chat sense, but it was there in a, oh, here's something here's a forum, a community post that we can interact with at the end of the show and have fun with the casters and make our own jokes and have our own community. And, that's what DoA and I really tried to do on LCK too. It's the reason why we said like OGN Legion, and that we created these identities for players, right? Like Score, right? You need to have some level of personality that's brought onto the players and onto the scene, and I think we learned that and continued in the steps of Tasteless and Artosis, right? So there's also the fact that in terms of monetization, I think I've told this story before, but before Riot ended up killing OGN's ability to monetize the English stream, in 2013, OGN had something like 25,000 Twitch subs. In 2013, after 1 year. Now
that Riot though for bringing back Twitch subs 2 years ago, something so bad like that, wasn't it?
That's like $1 million a year in just Twitch subs, guys. And of course, some people will say, well, that was because they paywalled the HD VODs, and yeah, that's true to a certain extent. But I think there was a contingent of hardcore fans that just wanted to support the English broadcast, and sure, obviously they get the VODs, but that had been the model with GOM TV and with GSL as well.
Yeah.
And it was a model that was very functional. And I think, this is why people are so much more willing to throw money at GSL, OGN, these entities than they have been with Riot. And Riot wanted to open it up to everybody. They didn't want anything paywalled, right? And fuck OGN if OGN was getting the money and was basically more than paying for it. I was making like something like $50,000 my first year at OGN. I took a pay cut from my job in New York to move to Korea. And so, they were making bank, basically. Their profit margin on that must have been enormous relative to the cost of setting up a clean feed that DoA and I watched and some chairs in a studio with a couple of monitors. Like, it's a joke. So, these things were highly profitable, but that's really what it was, is, the more I reflect upon co-streaming now, the more I think about, oh, that's basically what I was doing back in the day, because there wasn't a producer and there wasn't a direction. It was just a game. And I was making entertainment on top of it, and I was doing all the research, and I was doing everything, and I was there every day. And, I think one of the things that Riot has done is they really opened the door for co-streamers through their own decisions. So first off, they refuse to have casting pairs in League of Legends, just a random free-for-all of shit. So you can never actually get a definitive casting duo like you can in Counter-Strike, right? Where people become attached mostly in Counter-Strike to the duos of talent. And this is the way that you identify your brand and that you have a consistent synergy and feel on the broadcast. But Riot didn't want to do that because they saw DoA and I were getting too popular as a duo and we could block negotiate, and they didn't want that to happen to all their casters. The other thing that was a mistake is they oversaturated their broadcasts. I have said this for years as somebody who did every single game 5 days a week, 2 best-of-3s a day in League of Legends, and then also was doing coaching and shows on top of that. One pair of casters can do all of that. They can. Now you need some backups, maybe, just in case, and like maybe you pull up some people who are doing the amateur leagues or the tier 2 scene, just like GSL. But there is absolutely no reason why you need so many people on LCS and LEC to do 5 best-of-1s a day, 2 days a week. That's a 2-person job.
By the way, notice one thing you're basically getting at, and it'll be a bigger discussion if we actually talk specifically about Caedrel, because he's one of the biggest examples of someone fumbling at the talent I've ever seen in esports history. Yes. But the reason, what you're talking about here, Monty, is it's the classic MO of Riot, isn't it? They will always sacrifice what long-term could be a better collaboration to have all the control themselves in the short term, even if that is clearly quite myopic and is only going to actually work only in the short term. Because in the case you're talking about here, like, yes, obviously one of the main problems is I can talk of, not only from having been on the TO side, but from knowing people who are TO, like people who hire the talent, etc. If you ever listen to the conversations, I can see why if you're Riot, not only do you not want casting pairs, because then you can't guarantee both people are on, but also you want to do what they still do with Worlds. You want to create this environment that like you're all competing against each other at the beginning of the tournament to see who gets the final and who gets the semi. And that's almost like a nod. That's almost like the nod from the industry, or like you've earned your way to the top. If you do all these things, by the way. You can see in the short term how you're gonna get to pay these people less. You get to have them all on the hook. They're all eager to do whatever you say. They're all trying to please you and figure out like what does this God want from me in order to bless me with the final, etc. You're doing all that, but the downside of it is, as you say, you're never gonna have like an established super popular duo that's like I'd say Artosis that transcend the game, or Anderson Semler back in the day when they were also. Similarly, if you do this approach, you are going to end up with a scenario where here's what the logic of an exec would be. If I have, instead, like you say, instead of like 2 to 4 people who everyone loves and they're on every broadcast, if I instead have like 6 to 8 people and I rotate them in and out, and some weeks one misses the other, in the long run, by the way, if I'm silly, I would think that's great for my brand, because now if I take one of them out of there or he leaves, I haven't ruined the whole melange, have I? It's still fairly similar. But what they're missing here is this, Monty. And this is like a key point that they're missing in terms. I'll give you an analogy and you'll get it immediately. Imagine if Arnold from Gen G in League of Legends said the same thing. He goes, you know what? I don't want people starting to think this team's about Chovy. So here's what I'm going to do. Chovy's only going to play 2/3 of the games. The other third of the game, I'm going to have this like pretty good challenger player. He's going to come in on the games. Well, immediately, you know, not only would the results be worse, but all the Chovy fans would be like, where the fuck's Chovy? And what you're missing there is, in the same way as you can't just have 10 Chovies, there's one Chovy. Notice what we're talking about with core streamers is, it's not money, it's not all core streamers. I've said this earlier. It's not really if I core stream, that's a problem for LEC, is it? The real problem is Caedrel is the core streamer in English. Like, he is the fucking unicorn that when you could have locked him down, you should have. And not only did you not, but now you even have to allow him to graze freely on all your pastures and fuck your entire thing. Yeah, of course.
And that's the key point, you know, and I think the results are there, because also when times are bad, Thorin, it's cool when times are good, because you're like, oh, people will keep watching no matter what. But here we come back to Tasteless and Artosis. That VOD of ASL doesn't do 100,000 views without Tasteless and Artosis. It just doesn't.
Of course not. No,
like, and the thing is that if it doesn't do 100,000 views, then ASL doesn't exist. So literally, Tasteless and Artosis are keeping English language and possibly even Korean Brood War alive, because if they're not getting that, because they work for Soup, which is one of the Korean, it's like the Korean version of Twitch. It's a Korean streaming platform.
So people who want DN that team as well.
Yeah, Soup. Yeah, exactly. Soup maybe doesn't even run a Brood War broadcast for Koreans in Korea if the English numbers aren't that big. So it's possible that literally Tasteless and Artosis are propping up the entirety of StarCraft Brood War right now, even the Korean side, you know? So I think it's really crazy to say, like, you know, this is the mistake Riot made. And here's where the fumble was, is because what is the problem with co-streaming in the current day? The problem is that you have a loss of message and an ability to reach people via sponsors, right? And I do think that is a very legitimate concern, which is that it is hard for the brands who want to sponsor your league to get value when co-streamers are clicking off or talking about other shit or turning down the volume on the main broadcast. And sure, part of this is the fault of the tournaments themselves for selling bad deliverables. Like, hate to say it, Red Bull Baron Power Play is a shit deliverable, and it deserves to have the volume turned down on it. And maybe they should be doing something more interesting.
Once you've heard that enough, don't you just cheer out the word Red Bull and just hear Baron Power Play and not even think about the product? Like, it has no connection to the product to me. I know what you mean. It just sounds like
you can literally a better integration in the world of co-streaming is to have the Red Bull Caedrel call in, where he goes on to the main broadcast and gives his thoughts in the middle of the game and brand that with Red Bull and then sponsor Caedrel as well, and then your problem is fucking solved. Okay, but they're not going to do that. So
also, why were they always so lazy as well, bro? I've always thought that one was criminal, because that's even one where, like, me and you in 30 seconds can think what amazing it is, an integration on the broadcast only while you're sponsoring them. Everyone who gets the Baron buff gets little wings that appear over the head for 30 seconds. Like, bro, they don't even think of this stuff, do they, bro? It's actually crazy how bad.
No, they just don't want to put it in the game.
I know,
they're too lazy.
It's crazy
how
bad they are.
But my point is like, when we go back, you know, the reason why I had, you know, the big falling out with Riot is because they wouldn't pay industry standard rates. And this was a problem. This is when as I referred to earlier, for MSI in 2016,
it's 2016.
Sure. Yeah. In 2016, this is when we were doing, as I said earlier, the VOD restreams, basically, and we had a huge audience, right? But you know, we denied them access to knowledge of Korean players, and Koreans win the tournaments, so they looked like dummies. But the calls we were on, DoA and me and Baba Smithy, were insane with Riot. We literally presented them accurate data of day rates of casters in 7 other games, including games like Halo, and they were all higher than League of Legends. And they told us, those aren't the industry standard rates. We're the industry standard rates. And we weren't trying to be ridiculous. We were just trying to get a fair rate because they offered us shit money. As I've said before, they paid me $3,000 for the entire month of Worlds for me to do every segment of every analyst desk in 2013. It's ridiculous. On a per hour
for
basis.
comparison, I did like CS majors 10 plus years ago, where that would have been 3 days or less of my rate. 3 days.
Yeah. So, we're talking about tons of broadcast days here. And also every analyst segment, me and Crepo and Double. And by the way, they paid Crepo and Double Lift $0.
Yeah.
Because
and
they
by the
lied.
way, if someone's a fan out there thinking, 3,000, Monty still has to like pay his rent in Korea and stuff like that, mate. Like this whole month. We're talking about a month of work here. A month, not a week, a month.
And also, this isn't like, I'm going to go to work for 8 hours a day. I have to watch the VODs.
Yeah,
you think Riot helped me with that train whistle segment? When I was making those little tickets, I literally was in Riot's office printing it off their printer and cutting them out by hand and buying the train whistle myself. They didn't help me with that at all. They did nothing. I paid for it. It was all my time. Basically, if you count the hours I worked at that event over the course of that month, I was probably being paid less than the janitors who cleaned up the Staples Center afterwards on a per hour basis.
By the way, here's where I want to take this though, because wait. Oh, go on.
The point of this is to say that the people like me actually cared about the main broadcast. I cared about the sponsors. I cared about representing them well, right? So you have all the benefits of the co-streamer in terms of the personalities and the audience affinity. But the difference is that back in the day, and still to this day, Tasteless and Artosis are professionals who will do the work of doing the sponsor callouts and adhering to these principles, right? But instead of just paying people a normal ass wage to do this, you get cute, you try and cut corners, and then now what you have is even worse. Because like you said, now it's just a fucking rampage everywhere. And isn't this a much bigger problem that you could have just nipped in the bud by making the people who were good on your broadcasts happy in the first place? And like you said, to paying Caedrel. There is no way.
This is what I want to transition to. The obvious angle that no one ever talks about, Monty. This is never brought up in any of these co-stream discussions or about Caedrel. Is everyone talks like he went from being a pro to being a co-streamer. And I always tell them, you had him in the room. Not only was he in the room pro, but what you're saying now, which again, in the short term, by the way, Monty, they were making fools of all of us. They were getting everyone to work for way less money with way less opportunity, and everyone was begging them to work the event, and everyone was hoping they'd get called up if they were on LCK and hope they kind of get to do Worlds. But what Riot missed was this. All the money you saved by not paying normal industry rates, you wish yourself you could go in a time machine like Biff from Back to the Future and just go to, what year was it, like 2020 or something, and just say to Caedrel, here's a fucking $200,000 contract, mate. Don't ask why, but just keep doing what you're doing. We love it here at Riot. And then he never becomes a co-streamer. Because, bro, I can tell you, I alluded to it earlier, because he hadn't yet become the person he was. Look, he was a popular broadcaster on LEC, but he was just one of the boys, mate. He was just a more knowledgeable ex-pro guy. And in fact, if you remember back then, the actual fucking personality was provided by people like Medi and Vedi, wasn't it? And Dracos. They sort of did that around his knowledge, and then he was the really knowledgeable one. So what's mad to me, Monty, is back then they probably thought they also could just like nickel and dime this guy. But if you actually look back then, it would have been so worth paying that amount rather than let him go and become what he's, because now he is bigger than the game now. In LEC especially, his home region, he is bigger than the game, bro. It's crazy.
And also, I think it wouldn't have been a reasonable
And I'm with you. I think he would have just done it forever, bro. I think he's the kind of guy that would be on it today. He would still be doing it now. And he'd be loving it, by the way. If you give him a really good salary, he'd be loving it, bro.
And, I'd still be there, Thorin. Like, the whole bullshit with me was, a lot of it was just their shit treatment of me. And a lot of that was the absolutely insane negotiations I had with them, because I realized they were just never going to treat me well. It just wasn't going to happen.
That's weird. Wait a minute. You said Papa Smithy was there. So you mean he's aware of all this fuckery in the esports industry? Who does he work for now? He should probably get some content like fired up about that. Let's address these topics,
Well, Papa was...
To be fair, he's been on this series before, guys. I think people know he's a friend of the show. It's all good.
Yeah. And also, Papa got... I'm sure Papa would tell you he got tired of this bullshit too. You know what I mean? Like, this is the reason why League has lost so many casters. League has lost more casters than anybody else, by the way. Yep. comparatively. Like the CS guys are pretty much still the CS guys from.
Anders still casts now, bro.
Anders is still there.
Yeah, still there. Moses, Yanko, they're all still there, mate. They're all still there, absolutely.
Yeah, Machine, like these guys have been going at it. Henry G, like he left and came back. Really the only people, like Sembler's moved on with his life, but really the only other person is Sadikist, and he, he's not there for, some might say, good reasons.
I'd go the other way, Monty. I would say the only games in which you do get this weird turnover of casters, and they only tend to last 4 or 5, is Riot Games, is Valorant and League. Yep. Like Dota still has a bunch of classic people. Sure. Like, if you're in these games, but no, so another way getting to here is Riot does act like everyone is a mannequin and you can just replace caster A with caster B. But what we're actually discussing here, as people who've been in the industry a long time, is there are certain people are unicorns, bro, and when you have them, you don't ever let them get out your sight. Like, if you have an Anders, you wouldn't go, hey, I've got this up-and-coming cat. Why would you do that, bro? I always told Anders, he's finally done it, thankfully. Your branding is, I'm the voice of Counter-Strike. That's what your branding should be, bro. So when I hear your voice, I think Counter-Strike. It's true, whereas in League, like, mate, except for the rare people who must be the craziest, like, in the Warhammer universe, these would be the ultimate cultists to the Emperor, I guess, who were really close to him. Except for the people like Corby and fucking the odd person who were on like the LCS broadcast forever. It pretty much is turnover every 3 to 4 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. And even then, again, they haven't established duos. So it's really, these people are basically interchangeable. Even if they've been there for a long time, there's no real established brand identity that keeps them safe. Right?
Also, I can tell you as a quick illusion, because it won't matter to most people, everyone watching is probably from League anyway. The proof of what Monty's talking about, that Riot didn't do this like by accident. They explicitly did it. I think one of the craziest ones ever, because it's an example, Monty, of a duo that would have been huge but didn't get the chance, is in Valorant. Where in Valorant, they had Sean Gares and DDK, who, look, we know very personally because they were literally working on Flashpoint, then stopped because of COVID, went home, did a podcast in Valorant the day like the fucking beta came out, I feel like, or something. And from then on, I can tell you they were both super all in. Admittedly, they came from a Counter-Strike background, so they were very naive, Monty, about what the industry would be like outside of a CS environment. I tried to warn them. They didn't listen, sadly. And they went into a Riot game, and their plan, by the way, for real, was to be the Tasteless and Artosis. And I'm telling you right now, Monty, I think they would have succeeded. I think in Valorant, they would have become the biggest thing ever, because they had the mixture of the charisma, the knowledge, the background from a different game. They had a great rapport. They're super likable guy. Mate, they had everything. And Riot, literally, with an example of like a burgeoning, when you hear in Dune those stories like the Talaxu had their own Kwisatz Haderach, but he killed himself because he didn't fulfill. That's like some shit like that. It's like Riot had their own Tasteless they could have actually built up, and they were like, you know what? Destroy that duo, actually. Like, that's how stupid these people are. They're just literally looking by the way, in the mouth.
They literally would hire like one of them for an event, but not hire them as a duo. They very deliberately broke them up.
Yes, absolutely.
And again, like these are the people you want on your broadcast, because 100%. they're not the ones going, running all over the place and being the bull in the china shop. Sure, it might be annoying to deal with them sometimes. There might be some egos. You might have to pay them a little bit more money, but like you say, Caedrel, I think the thing that Caedrel could never have known was that he was going to get like 300,000 fans for a World Finals. Like that's not a good for him, but it's not a reasonable thing to assume. So if you are assessing risk, right, as somebody who's going to say, should I go do this co-streaming thing full time, or like Caedrel did, should I just like do LCK in the mornings in Europe, and then then I can just kind of head over to the LEC studio and kind of just cut the difference. And he would never have gotten as big, obviously, without going all in on co-streaming, but there was also a lot less risk in doing things that way. So I think if he was really looking at it and he thought, well, I got this fat contract from LEC, but I can also keep up my co-stream on the other stuff, I think that's probably where we're at right now. And he doesn't have the lion's share of every fucking broadcast in the world. And it, to his credit, a lot of people say co-streaming isn't hard work. It's really fucking hard work, guys. Especially because the amount of co-streaming you have to do to stay on top, you can't just like look at LS, for example. LS used to be the king of co-streaming. Yep. But the thing is when you start to lose that consistency, and I think Jat said this really well, which is that the core value that Caedrel, I think, provides is that when Caedrel's stream goes on, it's worth watching, because Riot atomized the method of watching League of Legends. It's every league's on its own stream. It's very different. Their website is fucking terrible, so it's hard to figure out when the matches are. So the easiest way to find out if a good match is happening is to walk onto Twitch and see if Caedrel is streaming.
Yes.
That is the easiest way to know if there is good League of Legends happening.
But you see, unironically, Monty, if the LPL was on, I wouldn't even go and check LOL Esports or Gamepedia. I used to just go to YouTube and type IWD and see was Dom live. And if he was live, and the match was on. If he wasn't, then I was like, oh, I guess. The joke is I used him as the official broadcast.
Yes.
That analogy, yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, Dom also was fanatical about the LPL. He wasn't, you know, with Dom, he would do like every LPL game because he loved it. And, you know, you knew he was the LPL guy. So if you wanted to watch LPL and you saw Dom on, you would go there.
By the way, he's the ultimate example I always give of how hard work it is. Bro, he was literally doing something where I used to tell him, I'm not even sure this is worth it for the money, bro. He used to have to set an alarm and have a 2-hour nap and then get up and do the next series. I was like, you know that, you do know in the long run, like all the study sets could have wear on you, bro. Like,
well, he was also waking up at like 3 a.m. and it was nuts. But the thing is,
which,
like,
by the way, is also quickly to draw back to the concept of the FlyQuest video, why I take umbrage with using those exact people as your example of who's ruining the industry. They're literally people, as we're saying here, that don't even do it for the millions of dollars, bro. They do it for the love of the game and billions of dollars. That's what you missed already, FlyQuest. And then secondly, they're not really just churning out a video like you did of any old shite and get a bunch of views. They have to work like essentially like a graveyard shift, even to do, one of the best jobs in the world.
And here's the difference, guys. You look at it and you say, well, they wouldn't make all this money. I promise you, if you take these people with their level of drive and intelligence and you put them in a different field, they could probably make more money than they do with esports, right?
And similarly, I'll also make this point too. I also think some of them, by the way, would do it for 200K. Never mind millions. Like some of them also have the love of the game. They'd also, but I know what you mean, Monty. Like if they had the same positioning in like a major sport, like, because I mean, let's face it, Ibai's done this, hasn't he? He's gone and done bigger things like fucking boxing and stuff. I agree. It's actually low key what Caedrel hasn't yet done, but I'm waiting because I noticed I think he's opened like a side channel that has stuff that's non-league maybe or something. Like,
but he's still going to do it for love of the game. That's the thing.
I know what you mean.
He could buy, but he doesn't.
Yes. No, that's also where Riot doesn't realize they're lucky, bro. Think about this discussion. Here's also why the FlyQuest video was so poorly timed. Because you put it out right when Caedrel hasn't been streaming LEC, and LEC view numbers are fucking in the toilet right now. If anything, Riot should be on their hands and knees begging Caedrel to turn on the motherfucking stream to allow them to have life in European League of Legends, boys.
That's what happened to LCS too. When he stopped streaming LCS, like the numbers went into the shitter, and like the games are bad, sure. And like I said, the thing is, League of Legends has consolidated to the hardcore fans, and the hardcore fans don't want to watch shit North American League of Legends.
Let me ask you a question then, because here's a question that I talked a little bit about, but I noticed almost no one else ever did. As I said, I've made it quite clear in this conversation. I try to draw a distinction between the core streamer who, let's just say in this analogy, for the sake of playing into the narrative, is more parasitical. If I core streamed Monty, I wouldn't have that many personal viewers myself that I would only be bringing. I'd mainly actually be siphoning the odd viewer that just would rather watch me do the VOD. It would actually benefit me to have the core stream more than it would ESL or League of Legends Riot, right? Difference is, if Caedrel does it or OnlyPixel, they do bring some of their own viewers and they do bring that, right? So one of the discussion points that Shocks tried to bring up, and many people have, is this idea that like, if you're getting it for free, you should abide by all these rules, the ESL principle. And then the implication there, which we've obviously discussed many times and you said on Twitter, is in theory, if we're talking not specifics, purely abstractly, what is the concept of core streaming? It actually should even be the other way around, which is the reason you should be grateful ESL gives you it for free is actually they should charge you if you want to be a core streamer. By the way, for people like Caedrel, that would still make a lot of sense. Even if it was $1,000, even if it was $10,000, bro, it would make sense. But here's my question to you. Caedrel and OnlyPixel are quite specific, or Tarek back in Valorant. Certain casters, I do think, though, have gotten to the unicorn status where the question I want to put to you is this. Some could argue, the way we just talked about LEC maybe should pay Caedrel to turn the stream off. It's that important to them. How would you square that circle? That on theory, some of them probably should pay for it because they put it this way, they have to have a broadcast to piggyback on. There can't be no broadcast. So but then simultaneously, some of the orgs seemingly need them more than the caster needs the league. How do you square that?
So here's the difference between what I did back in the day in terms of like co-streaming style, or what Tasteless and Artosis did, and what's going on right now, is that there wasn't a commentary track for us to play. We were the commentary track.
Yes, right.
And it is very different to do a co-stream in the modern sense where you are unbelievably reliant on the professional production. And by that, I mean the English language casters permeate these streams for the most part. and they provide content when you're not saying anything.
Yes.
It is not possible, I am telling you guys, to talk like a caster for 14 hours a day.
No, of course not.
Your voice will die. Like, my voice was rough. Well, on those, when I was doing like those 5 broadcast days a week plus shows, there were days basically on my day off, right? I would drink like throat coat tea with honey and lemon and just like not talk because I didn't want to blow out my voice. And casters have blown out their voice in the past. This has happened multiple times. So to be clear about co-streamers, they are fundamentally reliant on the existence of other casters. And I think this is where the casters themselves feel a little bit salty, because if you tune into a co-stream, it's going to be probably 70% the voices of the casters, and then the reaction and commentary of the co-streamer, right? It isn't them getting a clean feed and doing all the work. And it's only possible for them to be live 14 hours a day because of the work that these other people are doing.
Which, by the way, I will say, one area that actually is unfair from co-streamers is a lot of them don't acknowledge that detail, Monty. They almost do act like they get the clean feed, and I prefer you over the LEC. No, you prefer LEC plus Caedrel. That's actually quite key. He's essentially doing an unofficial TriCast. You know what I mean?
And I'm not saying that Caedrel with a clean feed couldn't get the same viewership, but what I am saying is he couldn't stream all of the stuff he's streaming because his body and voice would literally give out. And especially if he's trying to do it solo, right? He would have to, at that point, you have to have a co-caster because you need somebody else to bounce off and fill space and
it's what Dom had to do, isn't it? Dom had to, like, the whole sack of people. That's how it came about.
Yes.
Just have people to talk to for the bloody 6 hours when it's a shit game. Exactly.
Yeah. It makes sense that people do it this way. This is why, you see it now on LCS with like Double Lift and Medios.
Oh, yeah, the little gang.
Pobelter, they do this.
Yes.
And I think it does make more compelling content. And I honestly believe, Thorin, sure, Caedrel might make less money because he would have to share it, but I think Caedrel could be even better and even bigger if he had a reliable co-host or a series of hosts, right?
Sure.
But especially if you're alone, there's no way you can do this because there's nothing to interact with. There's no cast. It's very difficult. And so I think, to answer your question, that it is totally reasonable that co-streamers pay a percentage of their revenue to the main production, because there isn't denying that they are reliant on the main production. That's just true. And in the same way that DoA and I were reliant on the Korean production, and they were making a bunch of money on the stream, right? And it was their right. They owned it. They paid us. That's just how it rolled. But we could have had some similar model to that. And I'm not saying Caedrel has to give up 50% of his money, but do I think that a third of his revenue should probably go to Riot? Yeah, I do. I think that's a reasonable cost. The question would be, well, what about smaller streamers? Well, you could do this like a taxation system where if you are making under X amount of money, then you don't have to pay Riot, or they select you, right? And therefore you could make a living and still co-stream. But if you're making many millions of dollars a year and you have become the de facto main broadcast, then I think probably you should be paying something for those rights. That's my take on it. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And I find it difficult to believe that people, and I think it's short-sighted of the co-streamers too, because if this goes away, it's not like Caedrel won't have a lot of viewership if he pivots into other stuff. Maybe he'll have more, like you say. Maybe he'll put on events and have more. But he loves League of Legends and he wants to do this. So just pay for it, I guess. That's what I don't really get. And if you're OniPixel, and you're walking into a major Counter-Strike event. Now, I understand he has additional concerns, such as he was doing his own content, right? That was in the venue.
Who would do interviews, exactly, yes, Donna.
Yeah. Now, to me, Thorin, that's adding value. But if I was ESL, what I would be trying to do is, taking our existing sponsors and trying to apply them to those segments so that I could say, hey, you guys are still you had the sponsorship on the main broadcast during the break. You're still going to get it on the OniPixel stream, right? And OniPixel can just accept that this is the price of getting access to a co-stream. These people want to make millions and millions of dollars, but they don't want to actually have any kind of reciprocal relationship. And I do find that very parasitic, right? Because I care about the continued existence of esports. And if this is the form that esports is going to take, then so be it. But I would like it to be sustainable.
But
right?
I'm with you, Monty. I actually think the Only Pixel one's another good example, because to me, essentially, this is why this whole core streaming thing is so frustrating, because we're talking abstractly about the idea of core streaming and all core streamers. But in reality, in League, you only want to talk about Caedrel because that's really the most important person. And in Counter-Strike, Only Pixel is really the one that they're trying to message with the ESL messaging. But instead of just saying the following, Monty, here's some general ESL messaging for core streaming for normal people. Right, okay, we read it all. When Thorin sees it, see what core streaming, I don't get it anyway, but you get the point. Me and Maui, we apply for core streaming, right? We have to have it only be 5% of the screen when it's like picture in picture. When it's like a break, we have to watch the segment that's their interview or their roundtable. Look, we can still talk over it, by the way, but we have to have it visible in the background with the volume up, etc. Right? That makes perfect sense again for the more parasitical people who gain more than the broadcasters that we do. But what I don't get is this: why are you doing that? And then that's how Only Pixel finds out about it. If I'm with you, Monty, here's what I do if I'm ESL and I want to learn the lesson that Riot didn't learn. I just go to Only Pixel and I tell him this: listen, bro, I'll just be frank with you. You know which way your bread's buttered. You're actually bigger than we are when we do the stream, in the sense that, like, you could still do case opening and probably get a lot of views, or you could do our tournament and we'll get more views on our tournament. But some of them are going to be on your broadcast, and our problem at the moment is all the ones that go to your broadcast instead of ours aren't going to get to see our sponsors and stuff. So how about this deal? You'll like this, Monty. It's what we would in theory do. How about this? We'll just take you into some of our sponsor meetings and we'll actually carve out a little budget for you, and all you'll do is you'll do your own version in Only Pixel style of all crazy stuff and fun things. You can bring Donna in, and then when you do your interview, it's broadcast by the main sponsor that would have been in that segment, or you have an integration to do with your... Yeah, by the way, it seems like the most obvious behind-the-scenes back channel you'd ever do, innit? Because if you don't know, that case is insane, bro, because even though actually ESL rushed when they realised Only Pixel himself wasn't liking this, to sort of message and tweets like, no, but you can still do all these things. Like, bro, how is that happening publicly? Like, that should just be a private convo. The idea you pissed off the one guy who you really want to follow those rules but now isn't is insane, because again, like I say, he might just open cases, bro, or just do the odd event as a result. You've actually sort of cheesed him off.
Yeah.
Even though you could have brought him in the fold, surely.
And I think you can see this too, because I've seen Caedrel getting, like, frankly, you know, what's been so surprising about this, Thorin, is that this started as a Counter-Strike conversation, and then it kind of went into LOL. And
it's
then,
because of Shocks doing that tweet, man. That's why,
but then like Caedrel started crashing out about it. But what's funny, Thorin, is nobody actually did anything in League of Legends. So why are we crashing out about this when there are no rules?
I know why it is, though, Monty. First of all, Caedrel already, sadly, is trapped in victim consciousness because of the Los Ratones LEC Kometo thing, where Kometo complained about the fact Los Ratones was going to get that LEC slot. And then what happened is, this is the endless refrain of the brain-dead NPC Caedrel fan. They just endlessly go, but it's not Caedrel's fault, but Caedrel didn't make LEC do it. It's like, yeah, but that's not what we're discussing. When no one's saying execute Caedrel in the town square and hang dry and quarter him because he's in LEC versus, what we're saying is, as Kometo correctly points out, why does he get to be in the league? Because he's a huge core streamer, and I had to buy in, and I'm a huge core streamer, and I can bring all the same fucking views.
Fair point.
It's actually one of the few things I pointed out me and Kometo were completely aligned on. So anyway, that unfortunately made Caedrel be super defensive about this topic. And in this case, I think when he sees people say things like core streamers should pay, he feels attacked, because he feels like, well, why am I getting fucking wrecked by this? So there's that element I do think is like slightly involved in it, where they think it's like you're attacking Caedrel or you're for or against this thing. Oh, by the way, there's another sad thing. In the modern day, people are incapable of discussing things abstractly. They think all language is proscriptive. So if you say things like, I think core streamers should pay, you're not actually saying I think core streamers should pay money. What you're saying is Caedrel is a greedy piece of shit who was a parasite who only ruins this industry, and he's spoiling Shocks' job because no one's watching. By the way, even though I like people like Shocks and the LEC talent, I'm not fucking blind. I am fully aware. The reason you're mildly cheesed off about core streaming is because there is 8K viewers watching you do your job that you've crafted for 20 plus years.
That's what I'm saying.
And then Caedrel gets to turn it on and go, la, 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 and then he gets 500,000 views. Yeah, well, listen, I get it. That's actually kind of crazy. It's kind of fucked up, right?
I'm a caster. Like, I'd be pissed if I was on LCK and Caedrel. I'm just telling you how I would feel. I would be mad.
Human reaction, bro. Human. Because that's also the thing about the Shocks thing, that even though everyone's gone mad on it, no one bothered mentioning this detail, Monty. Little bit. Listen, Shocks, I understand you are an industry legend. You have totally valid opinions about the industry because you've got an interesting perspective. It's a bit self-serving to be like, hey, see this ESL set of broadcasts? I work for ESL and CS. I think they should be applied across all esports. I work for LEC and League. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, exactly. I bet you do think that.
Also,
even though you're right, I also... You would
also,
think that,
the funny thing about that, Thorin, is that it's only self-serving. You know what I mean? Like, do you get paid differently now, Shocks, because co-streaming is there? The answer is no, of course. Like, it's not like they cut your day rates because the LEC main feed has 8,000 viewers on Twitch. That didn't happen to you. So the thing you're complaining about is that you see that the writing's on the wall, right?
By the way, though, isn't that an interesting topic we can also discuss, though? Is notice what you've pointed out, which is totally accurate. I've said this a million times. I had a joke that was like, it's a famous political joke people make, which is you get these people who live in coastal cities in America who are so disconnected from the food production processes that they say stupid things, Monty. Like, there'll be a government mandate, like, right, they're going to like increase taxation on farmers or make things harder in the margins. And someone will point out, a bunch of farmers are going to go bankrupt. And a dickhead person who lives in like New York will go, who cares about farmers? You just get your food from the supermarket. And the joke there is like, think about it, mate. Down the line, you're going to get fucked by that, like, because that's where the food comes from. So similarly, people who are Caedrel fans will unironically say, Monty, who gives a shit about the LEC broadcast? I wouldn't even care if it died. And it's like, what would Caedrel be piggybacking on then? Like, he needs some broad. As we said,
that's what I'm saying.
By the way, I've done this with my watch parties where I don't have co-streaming rights, Monty. I just have to talk for 3 hours about any old shit.
It's hard. You're doing casting.
It's not the same. It wouldn't be the same as if I had co-streaming rights. I'll tell you right now. I would be the third wheel of the TriCast, and I would just put in my little bits of value where I could, and I'd enjoy the benefits of the cast as like sponge and machine, wouldn't I? So I know what you mean. That's the question I have, Monty. If there is a really a world where either Caedrel not turning his stream on means you have fuck all viewers, or Caedrel turns it on and he has, as you've seen in somebody crazy, that's like 80% of the viewers or something. What happens to the main broadcast then? Because it has to exist to some degree, right? Has to.
Well, I mean, the question is that do broadcasts go full co-streaming, right? Is it just a clean feed? But the hilarious part of that, Thorin, is that let's pretend LCK does that. We're literally just back to OGN with me and DoA again. It's the same. Sure. It's the same shit. It's the same two guys on the same broadcast with no producer in their ear doing their own thing that isn't supervised by anybody, and it's just put out there, right? So the answer is Caedrel would have to start bringing on probably his friends who are LEC broadcasters to his stream.
So we would essentially, like you're saying, recreate the broadcast from first principles.
Did you guys know that Netflix has more than 18,000 titles globally, but only about 7,000 of those are available in the US? So you're missing out on literally thousands of great shows and movies unless you start using ExpressVPN. This is also very useful because if you follow our movie content over on the Last Free Nation Movies channel and our show Foreplay, which Thorin and Richard and I also do, you can actually just get more out of the subscriptions you already have. If you want to watch along with us and you can't find that movie on Netflix in your country, you may take a look at where it might be in some other countries. Use ExpressVPN, get an IP address in that country, and you'll be watching on a subscription that you're already paying for. It also, of course, ExpressVPN will allow you to change that location so you can control where you want Netflix to think you're located. And they have servers in 105 countries and all 50 United States, so you can gain access to thousands of new shows and never run out of stuff to watch. It also works with many other streaming services. It works for every streaming service that I've used. And I frequently, being in Korea, VPN back to the US so I can watch stuff like HBO Max, etc. So it's very useful for me. It also has their lowest price ever right now. It starts at just $3.49 a month. That's only 12 cents a day. And instead of renting that movie online, you can just use ExpressVPN and you'll be able to protect your internet security at the same time. If you're out and about on public Wi-Fi, if you don't want your ISP selling your data, it's another great reason to use it. So the value is insane. It's also so easy to use. It's an app on your phone. I just run it in the background all the time. I've never noticed a speed difference whatsoever. I'm using it while I'm recording this right now on my PC as well. So this is great, guys. Of course, you could be smart, stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/horsemen. That's horsemen, plural, HORSEMEN. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/horsemen to get up to 4 extra months of ExpressVPN.
By the way, this also makes me think of another obvious question, Monty, which is, one of the most, here's another one you'll love as well. Do you know another person who invented co-streaming? The fucking in theory, the home story cups and the fucking beyond the summits, etc.
Yeah.
This is one area I feel like is actually really missed, Monty. I'll tell you one area, if I was Law or Shocks, I would be pissed off about LEC, is I've been told from on high at Riot to treat this like it is a really serious sports broadcast that's buttoned up, and I can do the odd joke, but don't go too far. And then what I'm actually being told by the fans, because it's just right, is that's not what we ever wanted. We wanted this like loose, casual vibe. And here's what would infuriate me even more, Monty. I guarantee you Shocks and Law could thrive in an environment like that, bro. If they actually had, if there was a broadcast where instead of it being LEC and it's all buttoned up, it was like a fun co-stream vibe of like you have a bunch of different people, you have the odd guest, you have players, but people can be a bit looser and they can have a streaming vibe. People like that would thrive. They would be very popular, I think. I think they would be, by the way, someone like that, someone like Shocks could even be a great addition to a Caedrel stream if she knew the role she would play in it, you know.
Well, the other thing that has happened with esports broadcasts, Thorin, is that the producers have become, they would like to keep their jobs and they would like to get jobs. And I think the problem here is that the ego of the producers, because they have been put above the talent in the control hierarchy, is that they have to continuously to justify their existence.
Yes.
And these people, by the way, in my experience, there have been some exceptions to this. I've worked with some really awesome producers, both at Riot and elsewhere, at Overwatch League, everywhere I've worked. There's always a few good ones that really actually give a shit and will go above and beyond. But so many of the top producers I've worked with, these guys come from sports and Hollywood. Like, if they're out here, they're just going to go get another job. I mean, maybe not anymore, but at the time, right, they could go get another job. And so they're not going to put in the extra effort, right? They're not interested in listening to feedback. They're not interested in the audience. What they want to do is show up and do the same thing every fucking day that they know how to do, and then go home and switch off. And
by the way, I can tell you this is a problem, actually. This is one of the rare problems in Counter-Strike broadcasts. If you want to know the reason, not why Thorin's not hired, listen, people have plenty of reasons not to like me, but why there isn't any Thorin-style broadcasts anymore. The reason why is this, Monty. When me and Richard were in our heyday, it was famous that, like, I used to tell the producer, I don't care, mate, you follow me. What I would do is, when I'm talking, if I bring up a player, you're welcome to put a graphic on screen, but don't ever think it's going to be the other way around. Like, I'm not going to be talking about something really interesting, and then you're going to flash up a different player, and now I'm just going to go, well, time to talk about him. But that is what broadcast became in Counter-Strike. It's for the reason you're saying, which is that producers, that became the thing that first of all, they wanted to shine. They wanted to have that really seamless transition to the next card they would talk. So that's great for them, makes them look awesome when they're show real. And then also, they want their bosses to think they're really important and they're valuable, what they're doing, like they're adding to the... They don't want to be seen as complimentary,
and they don't want to take risks, right? And that's
that too as well. Part. Yeah, they don't know where you're going. They want it. There's another thing, Monty. They want it to be really ordered in the pre-arranged. Right, we agreed to go from this to this to this. Yeah, absolutely.
And because they're ahead on the hierarchy, basically, if anything goes wrong, then they think that they might be at fault. And I'll tell you a real concrete example of this. So, at the 2015 League of Legends World Championship, this is the one where I was wearing the hanbok, which is the traditional Korean outfit, because it was the finals between the Tigers and SK Telecom T1, right? So it was the first, this is very important, it was the first all-Korean final in a World Finals, okay? So I'm wearing Korean traditional clothes. Now, my wife, not wife at the time, but Susie, who became my wife, it was in Berlin, and she had scoured Berlin to try and find a hanbok in Berlin for this final in the week leading up to it. Riot didn't help, of course. She found one at like the Korean Cultural Center in Berlin, and I borrowed it for the event and then had to dry clean it and send it back after the event was over. So it was a totally insane like series of events that basically my wife and I had to go through in order to get this piece of clothing. I come to the finals and I tell them I'm going to wear it during the finals. And the producers on the show were like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? It's not favoritism. They're both Korean. It's just a Korean traditional outfit. By the way, I walked out wearing this and all the Korean producers who were there were like, love it. Awesome. You know, because they're like, oh, cool. He's representing our culture. That's awesome. We love Monty. We trust Monty. And it got to the point where they eventually did say yes, But this took like hours of fucking them going and talking to people and arguing about it for me to do this, which was my choice. And Thorin, it almost got to the point where I had to say to myself, like, if they say no, I'm just going to have to refuse to change clothes and just walk out there and dare them to like stop me from going to the desk and being on the broadcast. And by the way, everybody really appreciated it. Everybody thought it was super cool. Was there any controversy? No. But this is an example of these people just exist to set up barriers a lot of the time and to enforce their rather, they want to take the personality out. Like they are literally just personality strippers a lot of the time, where they take all the personality out of the broadcast. They fight you. And, over a long enough time period, Thorin, you just stop fighting back as talent, because you can't do this every day. Just go in and say, I have this idea, and then have them be like, nah.
By the way, isn't this also
you spend all this time doing it?
Isn't this also one of the most classic dichotomies in the history of any entertainment business, which goes, it's the suits and the creatives. And the problem is the suit always wants like an Excel sheet where he goes, these things are what I want you to do and stay within these lines. And then the creative's whole thing is like, I don't know what I'm doing now. I have to be able to go outside the lines because that's where all the cool shit is. Like I always tell people, bro, the craziest thing about the fact that in Counter-Strike, they did put the genie of banter and all that shit back in the bottle. And now it's more like, look, the casters can be a bit edgy, but actually the desks are very, very plain in Counter-Strike. They're not actually anything like people remember they used to be back in the day. Is one of the main problems is they don't realize we never asked permission to do that in the first place, Monty. Do you think me and Richard Lewis went to Dreamer like, hey, Thorin's probably going to make a really inappropriate sexual joke here and maybe insult the player for being ugly. Is that okay with you? Can we? No, I just did it, bro. And they had to come afterwards and either tell me not to or convince me not to. And then simultaneously, the most famous example ever, I always tell people, you think I didn't just copy inside the NBA? I was a massive fan of that like 20 years ago, bro. I used to love what they did on that. I used to think this is better than analysis because it's just like some cool guys who watched the game. There's no way they actually like were told to do that. They obviously developed it themselves, didn't they?
Of course.
And it's only sadly after the fact that people ever realize they've got gold dust on their hands and they keep doing it, etc. So if you ever ask someone to sit down as a producer, they tell you not to do all the things they do on the inside of the NBA. They tell you don't ever make sexual jokes, don't ever be like edgy, don't reference politics. But these are all the things that pop. These are all the segments that go crazy. Well, I'm with you, by the way. They can obviously go, there's your worst segment that ruins everyone's career, but you have to take that gamble, don't you? You have to.
Right. And, this also comes back to there was a transitional period for a while where like the old way of casting. By the way, guys, I'm just going to put this out there. If you go back and listen to Tasteless and Artosis' old broadcasts, like, I can't say that shit anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, it is very funny. Like, I'm not saying it was bad. It was funny at the time. It's still funny. People just...
It's like 4chan humor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which just was what the internet was back then. But nowadays, we have to pretend it isn't. We have to memory hole it, don't we? Yeah,
I mean, you just look at the early StarCraft days and the shit that was said by In Control, outrageous
Too
shit.
Good's obviously one of the best examples ever.
That's what I'm bringing up. So Too Good, in the transitional period between we're going to be more professional and be more OG esports, Too Good obviously said something at an event in China, right? And the problem is that he made what was an edgy but also funny joke.
Sure.
Now, should he have said that on an official broadcast? The answer is no. Was it still funny? Yes.
Of course.
But people also strip it of all context because people remember, Gavin said on Reddit, like, James is an ass and we won't be working with him again. And it was this whole hullabaloo. But people ignore the fact that the reason why he said the inappropriate joke was that it was something like a 3-hour delay.
And it was just live filling for all that time.
He had been riffing without a game for hours. And this is what's outrageous to us casters, because all the OG casters, we had to put up with hours of game delays. And it's like, what are you going to do? Just talk for 2 hours, I guess. That's why Thorin and I can be and Richard and these people can be on a podcast and we just click instantly.
By the way, a lot of people don't know
this,
Monty. This is also what's funny. The whole style that me and Richard Lewis did of banter in CS, which became quite popular at one point in time, only comes from tech pauses. Because what happened was when we used to do Gfinity, it was in the era when people either got literally DDoSed or sometimes the event would just have like internet issues. And basically we would just fill for half an hour at a time because it was half an hour at a time. As soon as they tell you beyond, it's one thing if they say fill for a minute. When they just say, just keep talking, as in there's no sign. Then we would talk about anything and it became top tier famously because we're all fans of shows like that, of course. Yeah.
Anybody who's an OG caster has had at least one time where they filled for 2 or 3 hours and because something would break and that's just how it is. But my point is that, this was the difference between this is when we started to strip the personality out, is because the Too Good incident happened at this major Dota event, right? And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. They ignore the fact that he was at the end of his fucking rope after 3 hours. And like, eventually your mind just turns to mush. And, it's hard to rationalize in your mind how many people are listening to you when you've just been talking to yourself alone for hours at a time. And I think, by the way, this is true of co-streamers as well. Imagine if you're a co-streamer and you're on your 12th hour for the 5th day this week of co-streaming, and you're just in your own little room, in your own little space. It's hard to humans did not evolve to be like, I am talking to 70,000 people from this private room with a microphone.
Put it this way, when the fan does that thing where they didn't watch the 12 hours, they see a clip later in hour 11 and they go, he got that wrong. It's like, what do you think? He's been talking a million hours in a row. He's lost sanity at that point in time, bro.
My point is like, it's so easy to cross the line in those moments.
Of course.
But again, this is the, like, this was the transition point. And normally, like these days, we don't really have those giant tech pauses anymore. Like the technology, people's expertise has come a long way. Fewer mistakes are made. The engine doesn't just break. The internet doesn't just break anymore. So the tech pauses are a lot better. Like you don't necessarily have to do that, and it's not going to go to that degree. But the fear that this put into people, even though I think if you really ask most Dota people, even at the time, who gives a shit that he said this joke?
Yeah. I mean, look, that one's a bit more extreme because obviously what Too Good actually didn't understand is that the Chinese government essentially is connected to all the things that happen in China. He really did imagine he was in America or something, bro. You could just say, well, yeah, I get what the president or something bad. So I do agree that's one way that he probably did step over the line. You can't politically ever resolve that if you want to be an official event. But no, I'll tell you another thing this makes me think of, by the way. It's actually a thing I keep bringing. Look, I'll be shocked. Get ready for me to be self-serving and just put forward the things I think would be good for the industry, but secretly would be good for me. One of the other things I've actually said to people, I mean, you might know, obviously, I do that show with Tech Girl, Feed the Trolls, right? I set that show up, Monty, literally to be an example to tournament organisers of this is what her doing a desk would be like. Look, it's her and 2 analysts, and she picks a topic, and she runs the whole show, and she directs the conversation. It's not a Thorin one where I keep interrupting. No, in general, I let her lead the conversation. And the whole point of doing that show was I wanted to showcase, here's what an extended desk with Tech Girl could be like. If you hired her, look, she can go between topics, she can bounce off things. But here's what we both realised eventually is, wait a minute, think about how, especially in Counter-Strike, Monty, relative to the fact that League of Legends has way bigger overall viewership because that's the Chinese, right? Counter-Strike as a game is a smaller game. But look how popular big podcasts are, though. Talking Counter, the shows I do, etc. Like these shows get... what we have realised years ago is, since there is this problem with the desk, bro, why isn't like a podcast just a pre-game desk? I mean, again, it's self-serving because I do all the podcasts. I get that. But I genuinely think fans, I'll make it not self-serving. Forget my shit for a second. I think fans would love it if before an ESL event, Talking Counter was the pre-game show. I think they would fucking kill for that, bro. I think that has co-streaming vibes of what people enjoy about it. If you've ever watched Talking Counter, they even do that thing at the beginning that technically you shouldn't do for the algorithm. They spend the first 5 minutes doing the sort of like bookkeeping, like, so what are you doing the other day? I saw you on like Instagram. They do all that, the boomer shit that I had to get taught by Monty not to do, but that's just what people want. They want to feel like you're watching Joe Rogan or something, like I said.
Yeah. And also it'd be more of a draw, right? Like in the generic ESL pre-show, at least it would be a destination thing that people would, I think there's almost no way that wouldn't increase event viewership by some degree.
Mate. Yeah.
Now, would it double the viewership? Obviously not. But clearly, the more people you get in the pre-show, the more people you're going to have at the start of the match, the more people you're going to have in terms of average viewership across your whole broadcast. So I also think it's crazy. And yes, it is self-serving for us, but truly, like, I mean, there's not really a doubt, even in League of Legends, right? Like I can't imagine that if you and I did an episode of Summoning Insight before a major tournament that people wouldn't tune in for that, right? That would just be how it went, especially back in the day, right? And meanwhile, Riot was just ass mad about how big SI was instead of trying to figure out how to work with us to potentially make their own event.
By the
more
way, I'll
popular.
even give credit. Well, it's literally Tech Girl, the one I do with the other show with on her channel, who gave me this idea, because what she pointed out once, and actually it's a brilliant point if you think about it, Monty, is here's another area that we've artificially imposed a fake way corporate America, and we have to do an official sports broadcast for MLB in this sense, right? Here's why adding those fake constraints is stupid. Because one point she made is that after a game, like in Counter-Strike, a group stage game, you don't really want to discuss stuff like everything about who was the top fragger and what were the tactics. Sometimes what you actually want to discuss is exactly what the fans on the forum would be talking about, which is like, should that player be kicked? Actually, what is this team even doing at this tournament? Like, they're not even good enough to be at this event. Oh, if this one wins this one, maybe they're better than we. What you really want is what the fans want to discuss. That's the topic you want to hone into, but we don't do that because that's considered like some meta contextual thing. That's all just for fans in some separate room. That's not where we are. And we have to pretend we're the official. Well, I think the way they played was under efficient. No, what you really should do is just go to the conversation everyone wants to have in that moment. So I think it's a very good point. It's very insightful.
No, I agree. But anyway, like, turn this back into the co-streaming conversation. It's that I think the talent has been underutilized in esports in terms of figuring out ways to understand what's popular and include that in the main broadcast.
Oh, by the way, I'll tell you another thing as well, Monty. Here's another thing you'll like. You said it earlier, but I actually totally agree. Put it this way, I've never done this because I'm not an obnoxious friend like this, but I have had certain sponsors, Monty. You could guess if you know it's Counter-Strike. I've had certain sponsors that have also been shared by some of the biggest core streamers, and I would see how they handled their relationship. And by the way, my viewership is at a fraction of theirs, but I was always told by like the sponsor, like, I'm doing an insane job, like the conversions on mine are nuts, I'm getting people again. And I used to think, mate, some of these guys are my friends and they're already millionaires. It's like, bro, I could literally consult with you and make you like $2 more billion a year if you just listen to me. If I told you how to do the integration, how to make a fun, like we're talking about with like the Nerd Legion, if I told you like a fun way you could tie it into your community and you could make it a fun thing people reference, it'd become like viral. You just here's what's funny, Monty. That could even be an area we could actually bring the core stream and the broadcast back together. The broadcast has all the sales knowledge and understanding of what the sponsor wants. The problem is the core streamer has all the viewers and has all the hype. If we could actually merge the two, if they actually really, by the way, had balls, you'd go to Caedrel and you wouldn't go, I wish we could go back in time and here's 200K. You'd go, how about I make you $5 million next year? You're going to be the official core stream of my fucking show and you're going to have all the sponsors. I'll show you how to integrate them. And here's what I'll make you more money. You'll make me more viewers and I'll make you more money. That could happen. Well, I say could, it won't, but it could. In theory, it could happen, Monty.
Or deploy production resources to supporting Caedrel's ideas in which he's integrated, right?
Yep.
It is just baffling. But again, it's the egos a lot of the time of the producers. Like what happens is when something gets more popular than what they're doing, and I remember Riot was extremely bitter back in the day that Summoning Insight with us and some webcams was doing like 5x the viewership of their fully produced studio show, Primetime League. They were big mad about that. Instead of just because what they're doing isn't working. And so their egos are on the line. But instead of like talking to us and bringing us in and trying to figure out how we could possibly work together to make something better that would be more popular, they just get mad. And then they try and shut people down. And that's what happens. And it's like, what is the purpose of doing this? Because every time the tournaments have done this with people, they've created a bigger monster in the end. Okay, so you shut it down this time. Yes. But now you're literally dealing with co-streamers who are orders of magnitude bigger than your main broadcast. Like, this is the nightmare scenario, Thorin. I don't know how it gets worse, honestly, to be so dependent on these other people.
I mean, you could say the way it gets
mutual
worse
relationship,
is that you're not
really
dependent and the sport just dies. There's that too. There is that alternative as well,
Just commit seppuku as an esport.
What is it at this point? Yeah. By the way, isn't that even, especially if we're talking specifically about like Western esports, isn't that another thing in League specifically that is also egg on the face of Riot? Is if you just look at the overall esport, if you're Tencent, you're loving it, bro. I've got millions of Chinese viewers, got loads of Korean viewers, got really big broadcasts there. The real egg on your face is when we talk about Riot, I'm sorry, they did it to themselves and they've proven it with their own actions. Riot is a fucking American company based in LA and they are that is Riot Global. They may as well just be called Riot, bro, and everyone else is some vassal state. So as a result, result, the real egg on your face is not only does no one care about LCS, but like in general, in English language, you have utterly failed across the board. And actually, yes, a guy with a webcam has taken your broadcast and alchemically transmuted it into something people want to watch. And you can't figure out how to reverse engineer it or bring him back on board. And yes, if you turn off your broadcast, he doesn't have a broadcast. If he turns off your broadcast, you also sort of don't have a broadcast. So you're in a fucking pickle, aren't you? You're in a real pickle, mate.
I mean, I am enjoying Riot's position at all.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Like, I don't want League of Legends to die, and I am concerned about the current situation for sure, because it is tenuous and could fall apart at any instant for a variety of stupid reasons, or also not stupid reasons. But I think it's very disappointing what we're seeing with co-streaming overall, and like I actually think this is one of the worst eventualities.
Oh, I'll give you one other angle as well. You mentioned it earlier, but we'll extend the point. Here's another reason why they have to figure something out that collabs with the core streamer and adds value to both, and as a result, bring them back in the fold to some degree. Maybe not on the like just the NSC, but something like an official core streamer type scenario where we both make money up front. Here's why as well, Monty. Because it's not like the current model for the core streamer works. It doesn't. They all quit eventually. Haven't you noticed that? They all start Caedrel, Dom, they all start doing as much as they can, because at the time they're doing the thing understandably like a human. The more I scale it, the more millions of dollars I make. I'll just make it. Again, basically, if someone said to me, if I took a 2-hour nap now for him but woke up later, you get like another 200K, I might do it, mate. You know what I mean? And maybe I would go, fuck it, we'll give that a go for a while. But I'll tell you what, Monty, once I've made the millions, and eventually it's like, is this just my life? Eventually, yeah, I'm starting to question. That's why you notice what they all do initially is they all drop one region. And then eventually, as in the case of people like Dom, he doesn't even do it anymore. And people like LS is certainly threatened many, many times. That's why he does all the fucking trading card game. He's certainly threatened many times.
LS takes a long breaks now and just like, well,
there's another reason, Monty. You also can't just do that for 10 years. It doesn't look like everyone will burn out eventually. No. So I also feel like if you're Riot, one, you're either going to lose your unicorn or you're going to birth the next monster that's going to take Caedrel's spot. So actually, you also should want to partner with them so that he can have a manageable career. Like, surely the ideal scenario for both Caedrel and LEC is we both make loads of money, more than we do now, ideally, but we're all still here in 5-10 years. It's going to be sad if in 5 years from now, there's an episode of 4 Horsemen where we have to do a preamble of who was Caedrel, because now he's not even in LEC or League of Legends. That would be the worst scenario for everyone, mate.
Yeah, but I the turnover of these things, it happens really quickly. Like LS was the biggest co-streamer, and then he wasn't, and LS is so much. Even at LS's peak, he was so much smaller than Caedrel is now. Yeah. And somebody's going to take Caedrel's spot potentially, maybe not in League of Legends, but another esport. Oh, and eventually we're going to get an even bigger co-streamer in a different esport or a different game, right? Or whatever the next iteration of this is. Fame is fickle, and it's incredibly difficult to stay on top, and you just don't want to after a while. You just don't want to. Like, this happened with me in League of Legends, which is that because there weren't millions of dollars to make, and I had already, I already was the most famous caster, basically. And I couldn't parlay that into more money. Like, I couldn't parlay my position of being the most popular caster into more money in League of Legends in a meaningful way. And I had already done, Worlds and been on the desk for 3 consecutive World Finals, et cetera, et cetera. It was like, where does my career go from here? And if you're Caedrel, where does it go? At least in League of Legends, right? And that was the conundrum that I faced, which is that Riot was an unreasonable company to work with. And so where was my career going to go? And the answer was, well, with Overwatch, there was a compelling new opportunity. There was more money. There was something new and exciting to work on where I would actually have more control, right? And I would have an ability to be in the important rooms, which wasn't an option in League of Legends. And so, I think with Caedrel and what happened to Ibai is like, yeah, you get so big, but then you can do all this other stuff, or you want to try something new. And how long can you keep going, just doing the same thing over and over again? Like, the only way Caedrel can get bigger in League of Legends right now is if the game grows, and the game isn't growing. It's not going to be bigger than it is right now. There isn't a path, I don't think, for League of Legends to 2x its current viewership, even if they release the new engine, because it's just an old style. MOBAs are not popular anymore, and it's still going to be serving the same older audience. I think Counter-Strike is a bit different because FPSs are still being made. right? And it's a genre that everybody still plays, and Counter-Strike is much more accessible. But in a game like League, it's so, it's like StarCraft. It's so niche. It's a dead genre with a complicated game that's it's attractive to legacy players only, effectively. Ain't nobody new getting into StarCraft, right? Ain't nobody new getting into League. At least with Counter-Strike, people can get into Counter-Strike, right? But I think it's hard to imagine where this goes. And so on a long enough timeline, Caedrel's he's in the end game right now. He's beat the game, and he's like farming the end game, but even the end game gets boring at some point.
By the way, I always actually thought, I know this might not appeal as much to League fans because it's going to be outside your domain, but I always thought the core streamer that actually gave away the game on what core streaming is was Tarek in Valorant. Because, bro, listen, I don't say this as like someone taking a shot at Tarek. I've met Tarek in real life many, many times. I've talked to him a bunch of times. He was actually someone I was on friendly terms with. But he knows that, like, put it this way, he's not a very cerebral person. And actually, when he does his core streaming, bro, it really is just like your mate just gets high in the room with you and watches the game with you. Sometimes he's barely talking, mate. Like, at least people like Caedrel doing the deep draft analysis, or they've got some shit. He's doing, like, to me, essentially, you just watch him because he's a very amiable person, and it's fun to watch the stream with him. If that doesn't tell you as Riot, like, bro, it's not even the same type of core streamer. People would just rather watch this than whatever your broadcast is. Whatever your broadcast is going, it's essentially targeting no one. That's the problem. You've got all these things because you're top down imposing it of like, I think it should be this, and we appeal to it. No, what you should have asked yourself is who's the viewer and what do they want to watch? Like, but you haven't. And so bizarrely, I've always thought that would, if that didn't wake them up, and it didn't want to, because it was years ago he became huge in that game, and then they relied on him to turn it on. If they never got it from that, I don't think they ever will get it, mate. They'll just keep bitching and pretend like it's the world that's at fault, not them or something,
This message and the Four Horsemen are sponsored by Raycon. If you're somebody who likes getting outside but still want moments to really lock in, I would recommend the Raycon Everyday Earbud Classic. Become my go-to for daily listening. As you can see right here, you can get them in a variety of different colors, not just the black if that's your thing, but they have tons of upgrades. They've got active noise cancellation and a super comfortable ergonomic design that stays put no matter what you're doing. I've used them in the gym. No problems with them falling out of my ear. Also, they have different tips so they can fit your ear size. You can just go ahead and swap them out. They also have an awareness mode so you can hear what's going on around you. All you have to do is touch the button on the side and it will instantly flip over. They deliver the same premium audio quality as the big brands, but at half the price. Add in over 3 million happy customers and a 30-day happiness guarantee. That means if you don't like them, you can just send them back. And there's zero reason to overpay. These are fantastic. I've also used them a ton on public transportation, subways, buses. The active noise cancellation works really, really well. And if you want blush violet or cool mint or other colors to add a little bit more personality, you can get them as well. You guys can get the Everyday Earbuds Classic. They're the perfect addition to your everyday routine. Go to buyraycon.com/horsemen. That's horsemen plural, HORSEMEN, to get 15% off. And thanks to Raycon for sponsoring our show.
Here's something that's an interesting idea, Thorin. Why, if we're having a competition between players, can't we simultaneously be having a competition with streamers? I know in a way you're doing that with co-stream viewership, but hear me out. Like, let's look at the LCS studio right now, Thorin. It's in Los Angeles, right? Nobody is showing up. They're literally shutting the audience down multiple days a week at this point in time. LEC has said we're not going to have fans in the studio next year consistently, right? Or all the time, because we want to save budget to do more road events. Yes. To me, that makes a lot of sense, by the way. Like, I totally am on board with this. Now, the next question is, why have the studio in Los Angeles or Berlin? These are stupid ideas to begin with, and it should be moved immediately. That should be the next thing. But ignoring that. So you have these studios, Thorin. Why not just put a bunch of co-stream stations in the studio where the audience is? Just have a ton of them. Just have 50 of them. And just have content creators come and do stuff from the studio and organically collaborate with each other, or have segments between them during games, or like in between games to replace the desk segments, or have 50 co-stream stations and then 5 couches where they can all congregate. Right. They can pick who they work with,
so
and
cross it over the right.
And just Free for all it. Just fucking
Yeah.
chaos, man. And you know what? People can watch whatever fucking stream they want. And it's up to these co-streamers to get together and create their own products and see which one is the best. And you're all on site and you all have the same setup and you all have access to the same resources. Why not just do that? You know? And by the way, you could totally do this with LCS. Just tell all the casters tomorrow, hey guys, here are your co-stream setups. Good luck. God bless. You guys can keep doing this work. We'll give you a space to do it, but we're not paying you as, the salary anymore to put out this main broadcast. And by the way, they would have an insane structural advantage of people knowing who they are, and probably everybody would watch those streams anyway, but at least they would be free to do their own stuff at that point in time. I don't know. I just think there are so many more creative ways you could do this, because objectively, I think co-streaming is not as good of a product as it could be. And perhaps, Thorin, part of the charm is seeing the co-streamer in their own home. But I think probably with the resources that they have, they could do something that's much cooler than what they're doing right now. In just, they want to roll out of bed and just do it. And I get that that's easy, but surely they could be creating an alternative broadcast that would be much more ambitious and compelling than what they're doing right now. So just my thoughts. Like, if you're going to have these studios, why not just full send it? There's no reason, I don't think, for Riot to be paying their casters when they could just say, here's a station. Good luck with monetizing your own products. And if you can't do it, someone else is going to eat your lunch, then so be it. Right?
And as you said earlier, by the way, you could even argue, Monty, this is actually more the line Riot's gone down. Assuming, it seems like the only time Riot's willing to give up control is when someone else foots the bill, if you notice, right? That's what their general trend is, right? Simultaneously, couldn't we say the same thing? If you're the casters, you won't all be out of work, because actually, if you're smart, maybe a Caedrel would take Dracos and he'd be his casting partner to do the course. Yeah, I actually think some of these people, the Captain Flowers of the world, some of them would get gigs still, bro. They'd just probably get a gig with the core streamer. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and that changes the economics, because then the co-streamer is paying for that extra person, right? And then it's less onerous on the main broadcast. And, you could say, like, we have these sponsor integrations. Everybody must do them. Don't shit on the sponsor. Here's the language you need to say. And you just kick anybody out who can't do that shit.
Yes.
And it's sink or swim. And this is by the way, this is what I was told by OGN when I got to Korea, which is like, you be good at your job or we're fucking getting rid of you. And that was it. And I think that's why a lot of people struggled coming to Korea to cast, because there are many people who've come to Korea to cast over the years. And some of them just they can't cut it, man. And it's like, you have to be extraordinarily self-motivated and driven in order to survive, because the production just wasn't going to help you. They weren't going to do shit for you. What they gave you was a contract and a seat. That was it. That was it. And a suit, a crazy suit that you had to wear. And otherwise it was up to you. So that's where a lot of people just couldn't take it, or they couldn't cut it. But that's entertainment, man. And that's just talent-based industries. So I don't know. At this point in time, I do see co-streaming as the future, but I also, upon reflection of my own career, actually don't see that much difference between when I was casting and the co-streams that are going on right now. And I think that's the mistake that people make, is people are surprised that this co-streaming product is so popular. My answer is no, it was always popular. In fact, it was the default mode of esports broadcasting. And to bring it back to Counter-Strike, I think because there are recognizable duos in Counter-Strike, it makes a big difference. And also, like you say, the tenor of the broadcast is very different in Counter-Strike. It is much more old school in that way, that people find attractive, which is why I think many co-streamers haven't gotten the same kind of traction, except, again, for those people like Gaules, right? But they have Brazilian broadcast rights. Like, they are the official Brazilian stream for all intents and purposes. But in English, in the primary language of Counter-Strike, you have not really seen the level of dominance of a co-streamer like a Tarek or a Caedrel as you have in Riot's games. And of course, no one at Riot is going to ever self-reflect on why that is, which is insane, by the way. Why do they think that Counter-Strike suffers from this phenomenon less than them?
Especially since, as we pointed out, they have their own AB contracts, which is Valorant is basically Counter-Strike, but with anime shit. And then what they did is they didn't do the same process with how they did talent. They did the opposite, the Riot approach, and it has yielded the same result as in League of Legends. But they'll never reflect on that either, bro, that you basically had your own Counter-Strike. In this analogy, bro, that's like the fucking twins experiment where you take one twin and you put in a different family, and they grow up and you go, that's weird. He grew up differently with a different raising method. They never clued in as to what that meant, though. It's nuts, in it.
Well, like I said, they A/B tested it on their Korean stream with English language commentary. They could see that OGN's stream was more popular in English than Spo TV's stream. They didn't learn anything from that whatsoever, right? And the justification will be, well, LCK is bigger now than it was back in the day. Well, you don't know that it couldn't have been even bigger, right? You perhaps these decisions that you made actually lowered viewership compared to what it could have been in the long term. But that's the Riot play. It's like, well, we're the biggest, so this is the absolute maximum of how big we could have ever gotten, which was just objectively ridiculous.
Also, as we pointed out earlier, but I'll just hit it again for the millionth time, the other incredibly short-sighted thing was that even though in the early days, the joke is we did with Summoning Insight, what was the ultimate shoulder content? Like in a sane world, Riot would have just paid us to make Summoning Insight, and we would. And here's the worst thing, Monty, even we would have done it, you fucking idiots. Like, because that was before all the resentment and all the fucking with us. Like, as long as it was back when everyone was just a normal person in the industry, every talent person would say yes. Because here's what's funny, in the same way as Riot can't see that Caedrel's going to book, now they can Caedrel. He has to take a gamble too and a leap of faith, and it just turned out he landed on a feather bed where a lot of the people, the demons, will die. They're in the wasteland, mate. Like, so, in that sense, that's the worst thing about all this, Monty. If you could wind it all back, it's so cheap and so easy for Riot to just dominate all of this shit from day one, but they just never had the vision. They still maybe don't now, is maybe the point, right?
Well, they would have to share power.
Sure.
I mean, that's it. Like, they would have to share control of the narrative. And they would have to, at some points, bow to talent. But, you bring up inside the NBA, everybody has to just bow to the talent because that show is incredibly important to what the NBA is as a product.
And by the way, do you want to know something fitting? Because you won't know this if you don't watch it. Inside the NBA itself has been destroyed by stupid TV execs.
Yep.
Because what happened basically is it's no longer on Turner, etc. Their people got contracts with other gigs, but then instead of doing it like just every week, the same days you have inside the NBA, they just only put people like Charles Barkley and Kenny and stuff on other certain, like, I think it's like ESPN shows or something. And it, one, doesn't work as well, and two, over time, even they're just like, yeah, it's not the same, is it? So the joke is even the bloody idiots who had the original unicorn have killed it. They've all starved it and let it die, and these fuckers never get it. By the way, the worst thing about Riot, to bring it back to a classic Riot fucking complaint, is their biggest problem always will be that they've never understood the point. You know, when people say that the problem with IP rights in video games compared to real world sports is in football, no one really tells Messi, they're not here to watch you, mate. They're here to watch that football being kicked. It's like, no, dickhead. They're here to watch Messi kick the football. That's what everyone understands. Riot Games to this day, because IP rights tell them this is true, still believe you're actually here to watch Lee Sin, not Canyon play Lee Sin. They still think that to this day. They still think Azir's the champion, which not Faker player Azir. They've never got, somehow that detail, that hubris, they've never come down from that, Monty. And almost every mistake they've made is like as a result of that insane position that the game is what we're all here for, not the people in the scene and all the shit around the game. That's the real thing we're here for, you know.
So do you want to touch on the FlyQuest video at all? I know it's probably
we can do it a little bit at the end. Here's the one thing I would say is this, Monty. We addressed a lot of the topics, but the two things I thought were the biggest thing about the FlyQuest one is, one, it just seems a bit off. Like, to me, the part that doesn't jive at all is the notion that, like, the content creators ruined esports and that they're being selfish and that they're not building because here's the problem. If we had Richard, by the way, he would go crazy and have a massive rant on this entire segment. Richard is one of the #1 people who hates the fact that American owners in esports complain about how hard it is, but they all took like $40 million off a bunch of VC people and paid themselves to have Lamborghinis and paid idiots like Uni and Doublelift to have Lamborghinis too. And at the end of it all, by the way, then the same person, I get it, through a content creator and acting like they're not the team saying this, are basically then turning around going, hey, you know, I just actually took tens of millions of dollars and I've almost fuck all to show for it beyond those Lamborghinis that me and the guy who doesn't play for me anymore have. Well, at the end of the day, isn't it the guy who turned on the webcam and entertained everyone for free who's ruined the sport? It's like, no, If we're having if we're going down the list of villains, you're top of the list, mate. Like, you're the number one parasite in the industry. I'd even argue this. Who the fuck are you as FlyQuest to say that the problem with core streamers is they don't make people fans of the game? You don't even make people fans of FlyQuest. You haven't even succeeded in that regard. And then I hinted at this before, Monty. But like, all these massive NA orgs have also had their own crazy track records of mega overpaying content creator people who didn't do very good content. Like, they've also done this shit themselves. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, I also thought that the pièce de résistance of all of this, right, was the fact that the FlyQuest video had like 30,000 views and yet caused this massive controversy because everybody just watched it through the co-streamers. So,
they did. It's known
even the co-streamers, like the co-streamers just farmed the FlyQuest video for content, and they probably got more out of it than FlyQuest did, which is rather an indictment of this entire situation, right? Which is that everything gets filtered through some bullshit somewhere else. And the co-streamers win in the end, which is, I think, a problem. Like, it is a problem. But also, FlyQuest should, in my opinion, not
I've got
be
the numbers
putting out...
for you. So their video has 61k views. Even Dom's, who isn't even the guy anymore, he has 100k. Him watching their video on pause it going, this is shit, has 100k and theirs has 60k. That's without Caedrel, whoever else got in on this. Everyone was eating off that, weren't they?
Exactly. So they just got farmed, right? And the thing is that getting farmed like that didn't increase people's affinity for FlyQuest. It just made them mad.
Yamato said it best. Yamato said, even though he gets that this is sort of like a crazy fan thought, he said, once I watched that video, I just want to see FlyQuest lose. So you actually made anti-fans, essentially. Well, you made haters. Yeah, true.
And, you know, I don't think the video was as bad as people say, or like it certainly didn't deserve the reaction that people gave it, because I do think it makes some points. The problem is like you say, you're an org who's employing LS, who is one of the biggest co-streamers in League of Legends history. So you are actively getting in on this at the same time while sort of condemning it. And I don't really understand what FlyQuest wants to have happen here.
2/3 of the video doesn't even jive with the last third, Monty, because 2/3 of the video is here's all the problems of core streamers and what all these core streamers do. Then at the end, they just go, here's our core streamers. They're awesome, though. Which is like, what? And by the way, some of them don't even make sense, because here's one of the arguments they try to make, and I don't get this at all. They actually try to make the argument that it's better that some of their core streamers aren't like super endemic league people, because that's going to bring like a new fan into the game, which is like, mate, I hate that. You know, that's some like Field of Dreams shit. Like, that isn't how esports works. Esports works by catering to the fans we do have, not imaginary ones you wish would exist. You know,
especially in League of Legends in 2026.
Yeah, of course.
Like, exactly. there is no crop of new fans that's coming into this.
That's
game.
Also why I say it's so like out of pocket, Monty. The idea Riot or the teams themselves would dare turn to content creators and go, why aren't you making new fans of the game? That's your job. My job is just entertaining when they get here. Your job's to make the fans, mate. Like, you can't turn and put that on me. I'm the guy turning the webcam on. What are we talking about?
Yeah. Why can't they get new players into League of Legends? Is it because they have never had an onboarding system and now have 160 different champions and a ridiculous learning curve? I didn't make that problem.
By the way, there's even another detail. I know they'll never do it because sadly they already famously fucked Total Biscuit on this. Do you know something I would also have had years and years and years ago, Monty? It was obvious to me as soon as you got people like LS and core streamers, I would have had something like, you know, back in the day where if Total Biscuit got a certain number of sign-ups, they gave him an item in the game. I'd have had it be like, if you sign up through LS's link or Dom's link to play League of Legends, you get like a cheapo but unique skin that's only based on like some LS shit, you know, like with Kindred or something, or fucking, you know, sort of Leandries. I'd have made some like integration. If you actually want to make fans, that would be a way to have a pipeline to make fans. How many nutters would sign up for an account to support LS or Dom, and loads of people
or
make
eBay?
But yeah, a bazillion people, exactly. have it where if you sign up through eBay, Lucian has like a fucking Spain football jersey on or something like that. That would press like crazy numbers, mate. You'd spike like nothing. It's not exactly an expensive endeavor, is it? But you just have to have the vision. Again, all of this comes back to, you have to, one, acknowledge the world you're in, and then have the vision to see a better world where you all collaborate. Yeah, I realized to Riot, they're like, what are you talking about? Exactly.
And the point I wanted to make throughout this, you know, conversation is that it's weird that the conversation is focused around like, is co-streaming not good in the current environment? And I would say it's not good. Like, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good that these people don't pay anything for the media, basically the rights to make millions of dollars for themselves. I, in fact, don't think that most of them are bringing in vast numbers of additional fans. I do think that if they stopped co-streaming, that many fans would stop watching the main broadcast. Not all of them, obviously, but their absence would harm the product now. But they never had to exist in the first place. And at the end of the day, like, I don't think Caedrel brought in a bunch of new fans from League of Legends. I think he just turned League of Legends esports fans into Caedrel fans. That he has replaced that in the hierarchy of their viewing experience, and people who might have left otherwise are staying because of him now. I believe that. I do believe that. So he is important. But he's not like, there isn't a vast, mass of new players who's joining because of Caedrel's stream. I don't think that is true. And so it really is like, is co-streaming bad? Because, like, is it inevitable that it works this way? Or could there have been, or are there still other ways, like we've discussed here, where it could be actually integrated into the ecosystem? But most of the reasons why it has happened the way it has happened is because of the egos of the developers and the tournament operators who did not want to integrate these people into their products earlier on. And that's the persistent problem. Like, Caedrel can't have a moat of, if I leave, these other people will leave with me, is if he was constantly in a dialogue with the main broadcast through his broadcast, because they kind of mesh together in people's minds, so that if he were to go away, then people would be like, oh, I'm just going to go back to the main broadcast because I was introduced to it and it was an interaction within Caedrel's stream. Like, that just hasn't happened. So it really is, I feel like, a lack of vision. And the iteration of co-streaming we have got is not what it had to be or has to be. And it could be done in a much better way. So I think people are just like, what was frustrating about this conversation is people not understanding the history of the fact that co-streams were kind of the original mode of casting English language esports streams, what other games are doing and have done historically, and how that could inform, like, what's happening right now. And it's just like, oh, well, how dare you criticize OniPixel or Caedrel's co-stream? We're so angry. It's like, well, yeah, but the situation sucks. And it also, there's no argument that it sucks for esports. It does suck.
I would also draw as a principle, using inside the NBA or now in football, everyone loves this American show, CBS Galazio, that has Thierry Henry and Micah Richards and all these people. One of the secrets that I learned in the industry, because it's my entire model as an analyst, that a lot of people still don't get, Monty, is this. It's not just esports, but it is esports. I'll start in esports. As I just said, you only want uber professionalism and really serious when the game dictates that, when it's a really important, super epic game. Most games in a tournament aren't that. Most games in a group stage aren't that. And even worse, when it's a really bad game that either was played badly or the level of competition was just low, like it's like random wildcard teams. You also sometimes have to bring the entertainment from the actual production, not from the game. The game itself won't provide it. The reason I say that's an esports example is, if I now tie it to sports, that's why those shows like inside the NBA are so good. They aren't clowning when it's the NBA finals. It's an amazing game, bro. They just let the game tell the story. But what they understood, Monty, that we still don't get in esports is on a random Tuesday in February when two teams play and one player plays like shit and a star player's out and the other team just plays bad defense because they're already at the bottom of the table. That game itself, you can't just talk about the game. The game wasn't good. No one wants to talk about it. What they want is they want entertainment that you can add onto it and that you can sort of, and as a result, fucking alchemically transmute that into something of value to watch. And so in esports, I think here's where we also got lost, is because, yes, the absolute best casters doing a very serious style for the biggest games is epic. But even then, like you say with Tasteless and Artosis or you and DoA or any of them in Counter-Strike, we don't want that for every game, though. For some games, we need them to bring the entertainment and them to be the friendly voice and them to make fun of the fact that we all know what we saw on the screen was shit. We can't pretend like they still do at Worlds. Like that when I watch like Team Secret Wales play against fucking like Cloud from Brazil, that I'm watching the same level of League of Legends I'm watching LCK. We can't pretend that. If we do, we make a parody of the whole sport, you know.
Or alternatively, when Team Secret Wales plays Gen G and is getting absolutely slaughtered, like we say that Team Secret Wales can get back into the game by doing XYZ thing.
Yes.
But this is a
But
problem
it's
with
weird.
the way
That's
that,
one of the most famous angles I used to. One of my running gags was this, Monty. Whenever I would do an event with a new host that hasn't worked with Thorin before, they would try naively, coming from other games like PUBG, to do what you just said. They would say to Thorin, "Hey, the best team in the world, Thorin's playing some complete bombs. What could the bombs do to win?" And I would like do a very simple answer. Well, they can't really, can they? The map pool's against them. They're outmatched. The person would keep pressing the issue because they're used to all the sports process. You've got to get to an answer. So my running gag would always be, I would just flip it to the absurd and go, well, they could do a few things. They could do a voodoo curse. They could pray to the gods of the Norse pantheon. They could, fucking try to like create like a, like I would just do, yeah, exactly. The problem is that framing breaks down in esports, bro. We all know that we're not sports in that way. So we know that we know that if someone's bullshit, it's bullshit. We just know it. We all know it. And we can't pretend otherwise. It's stupid too as well, by the way. It's just stupid.
yeah, and I think what turns a lot of the fans off is this fantasy land, but Riot intentionally basically made bad tournaments with bad teams, and then created this delusion that these teams could do well. And a lot of the reason I think many LCS fans left was they were tired of just getting their ass whipped on the international stage, because every year for a decade, Riot casters would be like, I can't wait to see this NA team at Worlds. They're going to do better. It's going to be way better this year, guys. They really have a chance. It's like, they never had a fucking chance. Are you kidding me? Like, the narrative was so dishonest about everything that was going on at an international level in this game. And another reason why you created co-streamers is that those people were not dishonest. Dom was not dishonest about what was going to happen to NA teams. And people will say, well, he's so toxic to this LCS and LEC teams, those poor players. What is he doing? It's like, no, it's just a bad game, and he is telling it like it is.
Unironically, I'm not even joking. I actually think people like Dom, having certain players that famously didn't think were good and would bang on all the time, gives those players identity they don't have if they're just bad players. Bad players are forgettable as fuck, Monty. Whereas if you think about, the joke is, I used to have the ones I would meme on myself, who he or whatever back in the day, where I would just play Aurelian Sol or whatever. Like, in a weird way, even doing that creates almost like a heel component in wrestling, where people tune in to watch you bang on that player in a sense. Like, it gives them some value they didn't have otherwise. They're just a generic bad player who gives a shit. You can interchange any of them, mate.
But Riot very deliberately pushed the narrative that anybody could win while making bad tournaments with and sure, it works when people are new to the game, but we live in a hardcore world where there's no reason to watch a lot of these matches. Like, the only reason to watch LEC is because you like Caedrel. That's literally the only reason. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. There's absolutely no reason to watch LCS because there aren't any big co-streamers doing LCS, or you watch your favorite co-streamer for LCS, or you watch because Dom is coaching Cloud9, and that's pretty exciting, I guess, right? But Riot themselves couldn't foresee that eventually the audience would just be the hardcore, and that a decade, 15 years of ass beatings at international competition, you can't sell the delusion anymore. So now what people think is the main broadcast is selling me lies, and so the co-streamer is going to tell the truth. So I'd rather just watch the co-streamer because I trust what they're saying. They created an epidemic of mistrust. What can you say? Stupid. And you just can't do that in esports because people are so deeply involved in the games. It's not like traditional sports where everybody's just yelling at a TV and has never touched a ball in their life. By the way,
what day will this video come out? Do you know? Will it come out this week?
Next week.
Oh, never mind
then. It'll already have happened, Thorin.
Yeah,
people will already be aware of it.
It's all good.
But as we wrap things up here, guys, what you should be aware of is that we have launched a newsletter for you guys, and especially for listeners of this show. Many of you don't even care about esports anymore. You just like hearing these conversations or kind of generally keeping in touch with esports. Well, if that's you might want to check out our newsletter because it'll give you like a quick rundown of all of the things that are happening in like every esport. Just skip the sections you don't like, plus our gaming and TV and film shows. So go to herald.lastfreenation.com. That's HERALD.lastfreenation.com and go ahead and sign up. And then we will send you the newsletter. It's free. Just do it. And we do appreciate that. So hopefully you can find something interesting in there and give us feedback as well. So it's a new project we're doing. We're going to launch a new website soon as well. So that's fun. But yeah, I wanted to get in on this co-streaming stuff because I just can't believe the conversation that happened around this. Like the outrage of the fans when the co-streamers aren't actually adhering to the things that make the league's money or paying for it. Like the entitlement of that is just outrageous to me. And then the fact that people don't even understand like how this happened in the first place historically, or what was lost in the transition to all this fucking money coming into the industry, and these idiots who decided that they were going to take a dying sports industry and try and turn it, like you say, everybody wants to be esports now. The NFL has co-streams. The NBA is like, you know what's boring? Regular seasons. Let's have a mid-season tournament. Like everybody's trying to get away from this shit. Even Riot. Now the VCT is all tournaments, apparently, next year. Which should probably do a show on as well, because that's a massive change for them. But they're even moving away from the league model. But yeah, I think hopefully co-streaming stuff has been interesting, guys. And we will be back with a more normal Four Horsemen episode next time. Just the schedules have not worked out, and we wanted to get this out to you. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Until the next time, esports to Led to Est.